Chapter 697. It seems that we don't have to worry too much about the Soul Formation stage team battle. When Hai Yunfan returned to the office with a thick pile of materials, he saw Wang Lu, who had a well-thought-out plan. "What do you mean?" Hai Yunfan asked, enduring his exhaustion. "They are not of one mind." Wang Lu was concise. "It's fine if it's a one-on-one battle, but no one will kill them in a team battle." Hai Yunfan wanted to ask how he knew, but considering that Wang Lu had just gone to Dixian's house, he might have some confidential information, so he didn't ask anymore. Moreover, it was definitely a good thing that Dixian people were not of one mind. It could effectively reduce the intensity of work in the future. Overtime like the recent one should be avoided as much as possible. Thinking of this, Hai Yunfan was slightly relieved. So, the compensation plan can be postponed? Wang Lu thought for a moment. Be prepared for both sides. Make one first. Hai Yunfan sighed. This was the disgusting part of being a secretary. With just a thought from the leader, the subordinates would have to run all over the place. But of course, he couldn't be the only one to suffer. Hai Yunfan nodded and took over the work given by Wang Lu. He turned his head and asked, "Then what about your plan for the team battle? The situation has changed. Do you have to make a new plan?" Wang Lu thought for a moment. "Pick up the previous one and look at it again." Hai Yunfan said, "You burned it yourself." Wang Lu said, "I know, so please make a new one for me. Anyway, you participated in the previous one, so you should be able to do it, right?" Hai Yunfan wanted to vomit blood. "Of course I can do it, but how many things do I have on hand right now?" Wang Lu thought for a moment. "Why don't you call your wife to work overtime together? It'll be good to relieve your lovesickness. Some hardships are enough for me. I won't drag Fei with me." "You really have no sense of loyalty." Wang Lu looked at Hai Yunfan with disdain. "Husband and wife can't go through thick and thin together. You're going to cheat." Hai Yunfan held it in for a long time. "If you keep talking nonsense, I'll take sick leave." Wang Lu shook his head. "Forget it, let's not talk nonsense. Work, work." Then he buried his head in sorting out the battle plan. A day later, the proposal was released and sent to all relevant personnel. The group battle between deity transformation stage experts was the focus of everyone's attention. Everyone attached great importance to it, and at the same time, they were also very nervous. Several deity transformation stage perfected masters who participated in the competition had all secluded themselves after receiving the plan, even though there was only a short period of time before the actual competition began. The only one who could be considered relaxed was Feng Yin Taoist Master. The leader of the team of divinity transformation stage cultivators was neither training in seclusion nor preparing for the upcoming battle. Instead, he was living and training as usual. Right now, he also held a position in the organizing committee of the grand competition, but most of his time was spent on Spirit Sword Mountain, sometimes stargazing, sometimes practicing swordsmanship. He appeared to be relaxed, which made Wang Wu, who occasionally returned to the mountain, scold the old thing for having a double standard, being harsh to others but indulging himself. Feng Yin Taoist Master really didn't care much about this group battle. Because long before Wang Lu made his judgment, he had judged through the stellar diffraction technique that this battle would be more daunting than dangerous, so there was no need to be as nervous as the outside world. Of course, the result of the stellar diffraction technique was not absolutely correct. Therefore, Feng Yin did not disclose it to outsiders. He just sat alone on the stellar peak, smiling at the rolling mortal world at the foot of the mountain. His jade mansion and immortal heart reflected the mortal world and became more refined and condensed. Feng Yin narrowed his eyes. The world under the mountain was divided into countless lines in front of his eyes, which extended infinitely into the distance. Feng Yin tried to make his heart calmer so that he could see it more clearly. However, at this time, a ripple set off behind him, which disturbed the calm lake of his heart. "Senior brother sect leader, you're in a good mood, aren't you? You're actually playing at the top of the mountain." Feng Yin's mood suddenly turned bad. "How come you're here? Didn't I ask you to help Wang Lu?" Wang Wu spread out her hands. "I came to help him find you." Feng Yin was also surprised. He didn't expect that this guy was actually doing something serious. "What do you want from me?" Wang Wu said. "Let me think about it." Feng Yin took back his words, and at the same time, his mood became even worse. "By the way, I want to ask, how are your preparations going?" Feng Yin said, "This battle should be fine." Wang Wu said, "It's better to be safe than sorry. Have you ever thought about what to do after?" Feng Yin said, "Is this what Wang Lu asked you to ask?" Wang Wu said, "This is what I came up with my subjective initiative. Don't interrupt me, answer me first. In case you die on the battlefield, who will be the sect leader of Spirit Sword Sect?" Although Wang Lu is the proper successor to the lead disciple, his age is too young and his cultivation base is too low. "How about I be wrong to be the sect leader of Spirit Sword Sect?" Feng Yin chuckled twice. "Get lost." Yo, sect leader senior brother, your get lost word sounds weak, which is really worrying. Why don't you take a good rest for a few days and let me temporarily take over the position of sect leader? Feng Yin said. You don't want the offering anymore. Wang Wu sneered. Senior brother, you're doing this again. Have you forgotten what my identity is now? Why would I care about those hundreds of spirit stones? Feng Yin said, hundreds of spirit stones? Your tribute for this period is 5 million. Wang Wu was shocked. Senior brother, you've really gone crazy and lost your mind. When did I have 5 million offerings? How much is the annual financial income of our Lingjian school? Didn't you win a key game in the grand competition? Later on, Wang Lu used this as a reason to grant you a bonus of 5 million. 1,000 gold to buy a horse's bones. Wang Wu was dumbfounded. When did that happen? How come I don't know about it? Moreover, since it's my bonus, how could it run into your hands and become the sect's offering? Feng Yin said, Wang Lu directly gave it to the sect, so of course it's in my hands. Other people won't want this spirit stone, so in the end, it must be given to you. But if you insist on neglecting your duty, then I have to confiscate that spirit stone. Absolutely not. Wang Wu hurriedly stopped him and then gritted her teeth. This dirty trick must be done by Wang Lu. I suggest disqualifying him as the lead disciple. Feng Yin said. What are you doing here? Wang Wu was silent for a moment, and then said with a smile, Can't I come to see you? Feng Yin scolded. Get out of here, don't give me trouble. After sending away Wang Wu, this god of plague, Feng Yin finally breathed a sigh of relief, but a smile slowly appeared on his face. This idiot was still as stupid as before. When her big brother was still alive, she was not good at expressing herself. Every day, she was like a puppet, cultivating and cultivating. After her big brother's death, her temperament changed greatly. She looked warm and cheerful, but in fact, she was still not good at expressing herself. Just now, she clearly came to see him. After all, the deity stage group battle was imminent, and no one dared to say that they had full confidence. However, Wang Wu's way of visiting people was quite special, which was really hateful. After lamenting Wang Wu, Feng Yin was not annoyed, but it was difficult to restore his previous tranquility. In front of him, the fine lines leading to the infinite depths had become tangled with each other, and his stellar diffraction technique could no longer see the future. If he couldn't see it clearly, he would stop looking. Feng Yin's dependence on the stellar diffraction technique had become less and less, and he was no longer so sure about the result. Moreover, in this deity stage group battle, whether there was a stellar diffraction technique or not, he firmly believed that it would be a daunting experience without any mishap. Because, after all, he was going to do it himself, so how could he fail? In Lingjian School, those who were good at cross-level challenges were not only the two on non-phase peak. In the Western continent, Feng Yin had shown his edge, so no one would really regard him as an ordinary peak deity stage cultivator. However, above deity stage, how much leeway did he have? Measured by the standard of supreme level, was he at the top level alongside he two and the others, or was he one level lower, or 2 levels lower? Even Wang Lu was not clear about these things. Of course, it was also because he didn't want to know too much. The elders of Lingjian School were seriously his junior brothers and sisters, and their relationship was delicate. In the past 100 years, from a good point of view, he sacrificed himself to buy time for Lingjian School. However, from another point of view, the most difficult 100 years of Lingjian School was because his junior brothers and sisters were self-reliant without him, supporting the school from scratch. Therefore, so far, the strength of Feng Yin Taoist master was quite mysterious. When Wang Lu made the plan, he only conservatively labeled Feng Yin as peak deity stage plus 10, which tacitly agreed that he was equivalent to an upper-middle level supreme cultivator. However, other people didn't know the actual situation, But how could Feng Yin himself not know? It's just, why do I start to feel a little uneasy in my heart? When Feng Yin returned to the bamboo room, he did not deliberately pursue the calm lake of his heart. It was just that, after being visited by Wang Wu, he always felt that something was wrong. He took out the Kunlun mirror and looked at the future again. The countless lines became more chaotic, and the place where the lines condensed seemed to be pregnant with ominous signs. It was just strange that this ominous sign did not point to him. No matter how vague and biased the stellar diffraction technique was, it should be able to predict his own good or bad luck. Could it be that in this deity stage group fight, he could be safe and sound, but others might encounter misfortune? Thinking of this, Feng Yin picked up the pen and wrote a letter to Wang Lu in the City of Immortals. Hey, there's an ominous sign ahead? What is sect leader Reverend doing this time? In the courtyard of Immortal 5 area, Wang Lu soon received an urgent flying sword message from Spirit Sword Mountain. Looking at Feng Yin Taoist Master's detailed description of what he saw and felt in his heart, Wang Lu was puzzled. According to Wang Lu's current information, in this deity stage group fight, at most, they would lose the competition. Of course, this was also quite serious. However, the meaning of Feng Yin's letter seemed to be that the result of this group fight was worse than losing. This made Wang Lu entangled. Not long ago, he had just inquired about the information from Xian Mo, which probably said that there should be no danger in this battle. However, in the blink of an eye, Feng Yin Taoist Master came to slap his face. However, Wang Lu still couldn't ignore it. Feng Yin was a very stable person. Although sometimes he didn't pay attention to the details, he was mostly reliable in big things. Otherwise, he would not have appointed him to take over the Lingjian school. Therefore, when Feng Yin wrote such a solemn letter, he had to pay attention to it. The question was, how should he pay attention to it? Holding the sincerity paper in his hand, Wang Lu became more and more confused. Chapter 698. In the central arena of Immortal 1 area, the noise was deafening. As soon as one entered the arena, one could feel the resonance of the rolling sound waves, which made all the hairs on one's body stand up. A wave of heat made people blush and sweat appeared on their foreheads. This place was guarded by the Tranquility Array and had a constant and pleasant temperature. At this time, it was ignited by the enthusiasm of millions of spectators, as if a flame was burning, which made people unable to help but melt in it, laughing and shouting loudly with the people around them. Even though the contestants had not yet entered the arena, the atmosphere in the arena had already heated up. Because admission to the grand competition was not by ticket, and the good seats were first come, first served, many people came here long in advance to wait. In any case, for cultivators who were accustomed to secluded cultivation and had a long life, waiting for 3 to 5 days was nothing. At this time, the competition was about to begin, and the few days of boring waiting seemed to be worth it. After an hour of noise, the atmosphere in the audience only increased. Many people who came later could not find a seat, so they would rather stand. Later on, they could not stand, and the arena did not allow flying swords to float, so they had to show their magical abilities. Some people with higher cultivation base wanted to use the spatial technique of mustard seed to open up their immortal's cave. As a result, as soon as they made their move, they were bounced out by the array in the arena and returned resentfully. Some clever ones came up with a way to directly use the transformation technique to turn themselves into something like a fly or a mosquito. Suddenly, they felt that the space inside the arena was really vast. Of course, although this kind of insignificant skill could solve the problem, it was really not good enough. As cultivators, most of them were people with prestige. Most of them could not bear to be so vicious to themselves, so they could only sigh. Just as everyone was displaying their abilities, a few people finally walked onto the empty rostrum. It immediately attracted the attention of countless people. They were the senior leaders of the Wanxian League, He Tu, Kuqin, Zhuri, Tianluan. Feng Yin did not attend because he would go on stage in a while, so there was no need to go to the rostrum. In addition to the leaders of the 4 major sects, the rest of the high-level leaders followed. Among this group of people, the figure of Wang Lu was particularly eye-catching. With his King Pill stage, Wang Lu was ranked among the many supreme cultivators. He was truly a strange flower in 9 regions. However, this strange flower was very popular. After he appeared, the cheers from the audience were like a huge wave, which was even louder than when he too and the others appeared. Wang Lu waved at the crowd in a very straightforward manner. His gaze lingered on many of the hot girls for a while longer. Then, seeing that Wang Wu was about to walk over, he sat down at ease and looked at the scene without looking sideways. At the same time, someone finally arrived at the venue, attracting the attention of the audience. They were the few cultivators at the peak of the soul formation stage in this competition. Including the main team and the substitutes, there were a total of 10 of them, led by Feng Yin. Just as the audience was about to welcome them in with the warmest applause and cheer for them, a thunderous sound suddenly exploded in the audience. The Wanxian League's immortal arts are boundless, unifying the 3 realms. Feng Yin Taoist Master is invincible. Suppress the entire universe. The Feng Tian generals are invincible and invincible. Fairy Ling Yin has great magical power and shakes the group of immortals. These shouts made the millions of audience outside the venue change their countenance. What the hell is this? From Feng Yin Taoist Master to the substitute Taoist priest White Bone, everyone had a thunderous slogan. Just whispering it could make people's hair stand on end, let alone when it was shouted in unison from all directions. It was simply like 100 claws scratching one's heart and making one's blood flow backward. When everyone was feeling like they were better off dead, the sound of encouragement became louder and louder, shaking the whole venue slightly and making people's hearts flutter in the wind and rain. In a moment, the audience began to leave the auditorium. At first, it was a little bit, but then it was like a landslide or a tsunami. Like a dam collapsing, a large number of audience fled from the auditorium, leaving a lot of empty seats. Many of the experts on the rostrum also looked very unnatural. After exchanging a few words with each other, they turned their eyes to Wang Lu. Obviously, this was the work of Wang Lu. Wang Lu looked a little proud. What do you think, elders? These are the cheerleaders specially hired for this team fight. Aren't they full and powerful? The red-robed old ancestor, who had a close relationship with Wang Lu, coughed and looked at the auditorium that was 1/5 empty in an instant. He then asked Wang Lu, "Where did you find these weirdos?" Wang Lu excitedly said, "There's a place called the Sea of Constellations. I wonder if Ancestor has heard of it? Although the strength of the cultivators over there is mediocre, they're really good at bragging. When I went there, the current sect leader personally performed a bragging performance for me. It was a gorgeous mess. If Ancestor needs it, I can ask them to write one for you." The red-robed old ancestor repeatedly waved his hand. "No need, I can't afford to lose this old face of mine. It's a pity. I've already asked them to prepare the lyrics for Supreme Hichu, Supreme Kuchin, and the others." Hearing this, the cultivators of Shangjing sect and Royal Soldier sect were obviously a little uncomfortable. Fortunately, the sect leader was shrewd enough to keep his composure. While Wang Lu and the red-robed old ancestor were talking, the cheerleaders of the Sea of Constellations finally began to quiet down. Because the people on the opposite side had also begun to enter the arena, no matter how good the people of the Sea of Constellations were at bragging, they wouldn't be able to brag to the opposite side. Thus, they all sat back in their original positions to rest. However, before everyone could breathe a sigh of relief, they saw the cultivators of the Sea of Constellations take out all kinds of throat care pills. The colorful medicine bottles were very beautiful. A moment later, there was also a pot of jade pear ice soup. The color was amber, and it was sweet and pleasant. The cultivators took the medicine and drank the soup, contentedly beginning to care for their throats. These cultivators had no other strong points, but they had reached the pinnacle of this crooked way. At this time, in order to conserve their energy for the next match, they showed a very strong professional quality. In addition to the medicine soup, they also set up the purifying stainless array to purify the air. They also took out a pot of dew flower branches, which overflowed with a dense mist. As soon as the surrounding people smelled it, they felt a clear and cold sensation in their throats, which was indescribably comfortable. The Sea of Constellations was a remote corner of the 9 regions, and the cultivators here were often regarded as natives. The strongest cultivator in the sect was only a Yuanying stage cultivator, and it was still a weak Yuanying -3 or -4, which was really not good enough to be seen in public. Today, they were specially invited by Wang Lu to shine in front of the tens of thousands of people. These cultivators were highly excited. They rubbed their palms and from time to time, murmuring sounds came from their throats, which made the spectators sitting nearby feel terrified. Not long after, the match officially began. The cultivators of the Sea of Constellations kept their soldiers for 1,000 days, fully displaying the results of their maintenance. Feng Yin Taoist Master, domineering in the universe, unparalleled in the world. For this match, the Wanxian League gave everything they had. Everyone knew that the odds of winning were slim, so they would do anything that could increase their odds of winning, even if it seemed ridiculous. For example, the cheerleaders from the Sea of Constellations, the mysterious porcelain bottle contributed by the Kunlun Immortal Mountain before the match, the enthusiastic and cheerful human furnace team provided by the Yin and Yang sect, and the exotic delicacies offered by their friends from the Western continent who had the bloodline of the dragon race. According to Wang Lu, if they lost the match, they would have to eat the exotic delicacies until they were full. At the same time, the Wanxian League was prepared to pay a heavy price. Although Wang Lu had communicated with Xian Mo in advance, and theoretically, there shouldn't be any heavy casualties, the battlefield was ever-changing. Who could guarantee that there wouldn't be any accidents? Therefore, at the beginning of the match, the eyes of countless cultivators in the audience gathered on the field, nervously praying for the people on the field. In people's expectation, there were only the following situations that might happen. The union of 10,000 immortals, whose individual strength and team cooperation were lagging behind, would be easily crushed by the Earth Immortals, and Wang Lu's battle plan would be difficult to reverse. Or, in the case of falling behind in strength, the cultivators would struggle to hold on, and finally rely on an unexpected point to turn the tables at the critical moment, narrowly winning the match. Or they would take advantage of Feng Yin Taoist Master's tyrannical strength to constantly move around, looking for opportunities to provoke the rhythm, and finally win the match. But no matter what the possibility was, the Wanxian League would face a very difficult situation. After all, the gap in strength was obvious. However, after 2 hours, the audience was almost silent. People looked at everything that happened in the field in disbelief. They were tongue-tied, and waves of emotions surged in their hearts. The feeling was indescribable. In the field, 5 cultivators stood on the Milky Way sword array, and their immortal spells were like a storm, suppressing their opponents in the corner of the stone forest. Of the 5 opponents, only 3 were left, and they barely formed a 3 talents formation, struggling under the fierce attacks. Such a situation was actually perfectly in line with the initial expectations of many people. Because of the gap in strength, 1 or 2 people were killed in seconds, and the remaining 3 people tried their best to protect themselves, struggling at death's door, and then they were defeated miserably after a cup of tea's time. But no one expected that the one being suppressed in the corner was not the Wanxian League's team, but Dixian, Xuanxian, Xian Mo, Bai Zhe. They were suppressed by the storm-like spells, and from time to time, they had to deal with Feng Yin Taoist Master's starry immortal sword. The scene was unspeakable. And not far in front of the 3 of them, there were Xueqi 2 and Mirage Boy's bodies, which were split into 2. The bodies were real bodies, corpses that couldn't be resurrected. Even if the Dixian had great supernatural powers, they would still die, and after death, they would become corpses, and this was the scene in front of them. Xueqi 2 and Mirage Boy. These 2 were also well-known figures in the Dixian camp. Mirage Boy once fought with Wang Wu, and although he was defeated, he showed his amazing attainments in illusions. In the battle between Xueqi 2 and Zhu Shiyao, although he was beaten by a sword, he still won by a narrow margin. These 2 were undoubtedly strong in the Dixian camp, and even the most optimistic people would not have predicted their deaths before the start of the competition. But they died just like that. Less than half an hour after the start of the battle, the lone Xueqi 2 was successfully attacked by Feng Yin. The starry immortal sword bypassed the human skin apron and went straight for Xueqi 2's vital point, nailing Xueqi 2's primordial spirit. Xueqi 2 was seriously injured and fled. Feng Yin's heart was moved and he wanted to show mercy, but the Feng Tian generals from the royal soldier sect were merciless. With one chop of his axe, Xueqi 2 died. At that time, when the Feng Tian generals found out that Xueqi 2 was really dead and couldn't be resurrected, they were very surprised and touched their head with their bloody hands. Why is this son of a bitch so weak? After the death of Xueqi 2, Feng Yin Taoist Master did the same thing and severely injured Mirage Boy. This Dixian with perfect illusions, for some reason, actually revealed a flaw in the illusion protection array, and his primordial spirit was also nailed. Then, the Feng Tian generals finished with one chop of the axe. Finally, looking at the 2 halves of the corpse, they were puzzled. Did they do it on purpose? Chapter 699. No one would deliberately die. Especially these cultivators who had experienced the battle of the fallen immortals. They should be more able to realize the preciousness of life and should do everything possible to prolong their lives instead of courting death themselves. However, if they didn't court death themselves, It was difficult for people to understand why Xueqi 2 and Mirage Boy would die like this. The deaths of the two were almost the same. First, they were alone, then they were ambushed by Feng Yin. After being seriously injured and unable to struggle, they were finally killed by the Feng Tian general's axe. There were 3 unreasonable points in this process. First, why were they alone? The rule of the 5-person team battle was to put the 2 teams in a vast space, and then look for each other and fight. This kind of battle should have been more advantageous for Xian, who had a tacit understanding and rich combat experience. They could allocate their forces more appropriately and choose the right people to investigate, set up ambushes, harvest, and so on. However, the result was that Xueqi 2 and Mirage Boy did not respond to the main force at all. Soon after the battle started, they parted ways with the other 3 and played their own game. This simply gave people a chance to break them one by one. Otherwise, with the 5 of Xian in a group, how could Feng Yin find a chance to sneak attack? As soon as the Stellar Immortal Sword was used, it would be blocked by the negation seal. What's more, it stood to reason that with Xuan Xian present, Feng Yin's stellar diffraction technique would be severely interfered with, and there was almost no possibility of a successful ambush. However, it was obvious that Xuan Xian did not care about the 2 people at all during the battle, allowing them to be schemed against by Feng Yin. Secondly, after Xueqi 2 and Mirage Boy were ambushed, they fell too quickly. After being ambushed by Feng Yin, it was inevitable that the 2 of them could not fight. No matter how fierce Xian was after being ambushed, it was absolutely impossible for him to fight against 5 people alone. But even if he could not win, he should at least be able to hold on for a while. Based on the strength that Feng Yin Taoist master had displayed, he should be able to hold on for a while under the encirclement of the 5. Xueqi 2 and the Mirage Boy were not as good as Feng Yin, a master divinity transformation stage cultivator, could they? But in reality, their performance was indeed inferior. After their defense was broken by Feng Yin's sword, their primordial spirits were exposed without any defense. Then with another sword, their primordial spirits were nailed to death, and they had no ability to resist. In the end, when the Feng Tian general's sky-splitting axe came down, they didn't even have time to react before they were hit. Was this how a Xian should behave? Apart from these 2, the performance of the other 3 was also far below expectations. Xuan Xian was known as the calculator of lives, but in a match with a total of 10 people, he could not calculate anything. He could not calculate that Xueqi 2 and the Mirage Boy would die. He could not calculate that without the 2 of them, the 3 of them would not be able to fight against the opponent. He could not even calculate that if it were not for Feng Yin's mercy, the big axe in the hands of the Feng Tian generals would have been stained with the blood of more corpses. Bai Zhe also did not have much of a state. Before the battle started, he was like a dead man, allowing the 2 people to leave the team without any persuasion. It was as if he was sleepwalking in the team of 3. After the battle started, he was injured by Feng Yin, but he did raise his spirits. He repeatedly used the negation seal, but it was disorderly and seemed absent-minded. He did not have the demeanor that a Xian should have. Xian Mo was the only one who tried her best, but no matter how strong she was, it was impossible for her to fight against 5 people alone. Moreover, it was obvious that she was very dissatisfied with the situation of the team. With 2 rookies by her side, she could not fight with all her energy. And then the result was what it was now. The team of 5 had lost 2 people, and the remaining 3 had lost their will to fight. At this point, the outcome of this team battle could be said to have been decided. The Wanxian League had won a great victory. However, when people saw this scene, while they rejoiced, they found it even more unbelievable and inconceivable. Why? Of course, winning was a good thing, but there must always be a reason. This kind of unknown victory was really frightening. Therefore, even if they had an overwhelming advantage in the situation, people would still worry if this was a conspiracy. They would worry if the 2 corpses of the 2 people would suddenly come back to life. They would worry that Bai Zhe, Xian Mo, and Xuan Xian would have some powerful trump card that was about to be revealed. In the audience stand, millions of people watched the Wanxian League's advantage continue to accumulate. Feng Yin Taoist Master, Feng Tian Generals, Fairy Bell Sound, Scarlet Thunder, Taoist Whitebone. They flew around the field like flowers. From time to time, they set off a bloody light, leaving terrible wounds on the body of the Xian side. Finally, when Xuan Xian's 17th attempt to interrupt Feng Yin's flying sword failed, he sighed helplessly and said, "I admit defeat." Thus, at the end of the match, the Wanxian League won a great victory. They replaced 2 of the opponent's generals with 0 casualties, and also won more than 1,500 points in the grand competition. In one fell swoop, the difference between the 2 camps was reduced to less than 1,000 points. At this point, the tsunami-like cheers from the audience finally overflowed. They had really won this match. The victory in the deity stage team fight was a great joy. The Wanxian League once again fell into a carnival that lasted for many days. Many cultivators who had nothing to do with the match were almost crazy with joy. After the news of the victory of the match came out, there were immediately local tycoons who scattered money in the streets of Area A and B. The sky was like a rain of spirit stones, which injured countless civilians. Outside the major casinos, there were people who laughed crazily and suffocated. Some people jumped down from a height of dozens of meters on the spot and then cut their own throats while falling. The major restaurants were bustling with customers, and they needed to urgently transfer the stock of spirits to meet the needs of the guests. The streets and alleys were full of drunkards lying on the ground. The authorized products related to several Taoist masters of deity stage in the shops were swept away. All the rooms in the inn were full, and the sound of hum and ah rose and fell in the rooms like a symphony ceremony. Even the sound-canceling array in the room could not stop it. This day was the carnival day of the Wanxian League. Many men and women who did not know each other, just because they shouted the victory slogan at the same time or supported the same Taoist master of deity stage, could hug each other intimately, and then go to the inn hand in hand to spend the joy of intimacy. After the clouds and rain stopped, they would go their separate ways. Seeing this scene, the elders of Kunlun Immortal Mountain repeatedly shouted that the moral degeneration of the world was getting worse and worse. After the grand competition was over, they would use the immortal treasure in the tomb to reshape the moral code of 9 regions. On the other hand, 4-Element Supreme of 4-Element sect was overjoyed. He repeatedly praised that the reproduction plan of 9 regions was within reach. He wished the contestants in the arena a winning streak and provided more mating and reproduction opportunities for the audience. In any case, most people were extremely happy with this victory, but there were always a few exceptions in the general context. Wang Lu was one of them. This victory is too strange. Until now, we still can't figure out how we won. So I think it's no different from losing. In the courtyard of Immortal 5 area, Wang Lu said to his secretary, Hai Yunfan, with a straight face, "Since we lost, there's no need to give the victory subsidy. Of course, during this period of time, everyone has worked hard to prepare for the competition, so the subsidy that should be given should still be given. However, for some people who didn't work hard, just forget about it." Hai Yunfan smiled and said, "For example, there's no need to give your master's share, right?" Wang Lu nodded and said, "You're a promising student." "Promising your ass. I'm still here." Wang Wu angrily slapped the table and said, "You guys think I don't exist? And who told you that I didn't work hard? If it weren't for me, how could they win so easily?" Wang Lu immediately asked, "Please explain in detail. Do you have any connection with this victory?" "I am your master, and you are the chief planner of this competition. Is this connection close enough?" Wang Lu thought for a moment and said, "Have I not severed the relationship between you and me? Do you have to be so fierce? All right, what do you want me to do? Just say it. Don't make fun of a sensitive topic like the subsidy." Wang Lu then seriously said, "There is indeed one thing that I want to ask you to accompany me to the group of immortal tombs again. I also want to talk to Xian Mo." Wang Wu was taken aback. "You still want to look for Xian Mo? Do you really not want to give up until you kill her? Look for her before the competition, look for her again after the competition, pay attention to the melon field. It's rare for her to be close to us in the Dixian camp. It's not good for anyone to force her into a corner." After a pause, Wang Wu showed an even more surprised expression. "Or do you really have a relationship with that girl? Not bad, little Wang Lu. You've unknowingly grown up and began to look for a woman. Xian Mo is a good girl. Remember to call me when you're tired of playing with her." Wang Lu sighed and directly ignored his master's nonsense. "I still don't understand what's going on in that competition. The Dixian team's loss is too strange." Wang Wu sneered. "What's strange about it? It's clear that the Dixian team doesn't want to win and gave up the victory. Anyone who has seen that scene would understand. The problem is, why did they give up the victory? The score of this competition is as high as 1,500. It's not something that can be easily given up. Moreover, What about Xueqi 2 and Mirage Boy? They even gave up their lives? Wang Wu said, isn't it obvious? They offended someone and were pushed out as a target. Wang Lu said, Xueqi 2 and Bai Zhe, those two slaughtering demons, can be ignored, but Shenmo's temper also offended people? Wang Wu said, it's probably because he's pregnant with your flesh and blood, so he's regarded as an impure person. Wang Lu said, let's not talk about anything else. This group of Dixian team members are comrades who fought against the fallen immortals together. They have gone through life and death together. What kind of contradiction would make them kill people with a borrowed knife in this kind of competition? In the end, the grand competition is just a competition. So what if the Dixian team lost? It's nothing more than losing the initiative of the next step, and the people are still the same. Or it's because the victory of this competition is not so important that their own lives and team harmony are more important. Now they don't even care about the overall situation. To what extent has the internal contradiction accumulated? Listening to Wang Lu's words, Hai Yunfan interrupted. These are all your assumptions, right? Do you have anything to support it? Wang Lu said, that's why I want to find Shenmo and ask him about it. This matter involves the overall rhythm of the grand competition, so we must be careful. So, someone in the name of doing odd jobs here, you slack off every day and receive high subsidies. Shouldn't you do something serious once in a while? Wang Wu sighed and said, very well, who told me to work hard? Just tell me the time. I'll accompany you to the dragon's pool and tiger's den. Chapter 700. Different from the last time he went to the whirlpool of stars to visit Shenmo. This time, Wang Lu was ready to fight. The last time they met, Wang Lu and Shenmo had a good talk. That was because they both had a sense of propriety in the conversation and did not cross the line, so the atmosphere was harmonious. At the same time, Wang Lu's sudden departure did not inform anyone before that, so the Dixian side was also caught off guard. However, in the deity stage battle, Dixian lost 2 people and lost 1,500 points. As a contestant, Shenmo's conversation with Wang Lu was really impossible to explain. According to the normal line of thought, at this time, the Dixian camp would never allow Wang Lu to talk to Shenmo in such a big way. However, Wang Lu had too many questions that had to be confirmed by Shenmo, so the second meeting was imperative. And Wang Wu, as his bodyguard, was also duty-bound. It was not that there was no expert in the Wanxian League who could serve as a bodyguard, and the red-robed ancestor was one of the forces that could be borrowed. However, according to the formal process, it would take at least half a month to use a supreme-level expert. Therefore, Wang Lu settled for the second best. Even if he could not afford a supreme-level expert, he could still make do with the number 1 king pill in 9 regions. In Wang Lu's view, even if the power of the number 1 king pill in 9 regions was not as good as that of a supreme, the difference would not be too big, because she inherited his legacy. If it were him, after experiencing the catastrophe in the Savage Land, 150 years was enough for him to become the top cultivator in the world. And even if Wang Wu was not as good as him, the gap would not be too big. Because her perception and perseverance were really amazing, and the only thing that limited her to immortal cultivation was her spirit root. However, judging the future of immortal cultivation according to the grade of spirit root was just the old path of the predecessors. There were 3,000 great Daos in the world, so it was not necessary to hang on a single tree. If she had a way to circumvent the restrictions of the spiritual route, such as the outer path that she was walking now, then her future would be limitless. Right now, Wang Wu's strength was about the peak of the deification stage, but no one dared to say that this was her limit. Wang Lu also didn't think that this was her limit. He had full confidence in Wang Wu. Therefore, he brought along his cheap and high-quality bodyguards and directly went to the heavenly earth of the Tomb of Immortals. However, to his surprise, the entire journey was safe and sound. No one came out to obstruct him, nor did he step on any sinister traps. The two of them smoothly met the master of the tavern Heaven on Earth, Dixian Shenmo. It was still the same elegant hall. The Dixian woman sat quietly in the hall, slightly lost in thought. After seeing Wang Lu and Wang Chong, Shenmo nodded and revealed a forced smile before ignoring them. Wang Lu was curious. Since the recovery of her schizophrenia, Shenmo had always been well-educated and well-mannered. Now that the distinguished guests were here, how could she not even bring a few cups of tea? It was not until Wang Lu sat down on the futon in front of her and was ready to ask questions that Shenmo woke up from her dream. She said in surprise, "You guys are here?" Wang Lu was convinced and said, "Your divine ability to look down on others has reached the immortal realm." Xian Mo apologetically smiled. "I was a bit distracted." Then she got up to serve tea to the guests. However, her posture was shaky and she staggered. A trace of redness slowly appeared on her cheeks, sparkling beads of sweat appeared on her forehead, and her eyes were blurred. After seeing this, Wang Lu was shocked and quickly asked Wang Wu, "Consult a professional's opinion. Look at her. Doesn't it look like she is enjoying some forbidden pleasure?" Wang Wu also thought deeply. "I didn't expect Dixian to be so forthright. She would look down on you in the daytime. I think you should seize the opportunity to have a deep conversation with her. It will help to promote the cooperation between our two sides. I think this precious opportunity should be left to the professionals. Your telepathic finger will definitely let her enjoy a different kind of pleasure. Telepathic finger is already a thing of the past. Now I am developing a new skill. You withdrew money from the public account to say that you want to open the secret weapon. Is it to develop this thing?" As the two were whispering, they suddenly saw Xian Mo stagger. Her body seemed to be unable to suppress it. A cloud of mist rose from the ground. In an instant, the vast hall was filled with the fragrance of wine. Wang Lu was dumbfounded. Did she drink too much just now? As he said this, his gaze turned to the praying mat that Xian Mo was sitting on just now. He saw that the patterns on the praying mat were profound. Within the exquisite decorations, there was an ice heart calming formation. Only then did he understand that Xian Mo was sitting on the praying mat to clear her mind and sober up. He didn't know how much celestial wine she had drunk. With Dixian's cultivation, he was actually unable to suppress the drunkenness on his own. He had to rely on external help. But now, in order to get up to welcome the guest, Xian Mo had left the praying mat. Instantly, the drunkenness surged, and her mind was in a mess. Her figure was even more dazed. However, a lazy smile appeared on her face. "Aya, why is my house spinning?" As he spoke, Xian Mo swayed her waist slightly. She stretched out her sleeves and started to spin. She started to dance gracefully while humming a light tune. But how could Dixian's dance be ordinary? With a wave of her hand, the wind and clouds surged in the main hall. The yin and yang qi were rolled up by her hands and formed a hurricane. All the simple furniture in the hall were swept up by the hurricane, spinning and tearing into pieces. Even the impregnable hall itself was trembling slightly. Cultivators like Dixian had reached the peak of the immortal path. Every movement of their hands or feet had great power. The hurricane in the hall was strong enough to blow away the primordial spirit of a nascent soul cultivator in an instant. Moreover, she used it in front of the two cultivators with the king pill. It was simply murder. Fortunately, the king pill was not an ordinary king pill. Wang Wu raised her hand and created a golden shield to protect the two of them. No matter how the outside wind and rain hit them, the shield remained motionless. After a while, the hurricane dissipated, and Xian Mo was no longer drunk. Seeing the mess in the hall, she shook her head and smiled bitterly. "It's really ugly." Wang Lu nodded. "It's indeed ugly." Xian Mo was shocked. "Why are you here?" A moment later, Xian Mo said apologetically, "I was really confused just now. Please forgive me." "It's okay. Moreover, looking at your performance, I have confirmed a lot of conjectures, which are of great significance." The fact that Xian Mo was drunk to the point of being delirious was very significant in itself. In theory, she was not the kind of cultivator who indulged in debauchery. Her words and deeds were all in accordance with the law. Even if this kind of person drank, she would only take a sip and would rarely get drunk. Unless there was a special situation. For example, the deity stage team fight not long ago. Wang Lu went straight to the point. "Did you guys have an internal strife?" Xian Mo smiled bitterly. "Yes. The internal strife of the team should not be told to outsiders at will. However, after that bad team fight, the internal strife was something that could be guessed by those who were interested in it. It could not be concealed at all. Therefore, Xian Mo did not hide it." Wang Lu said with a smile, "You guys were pushed aside, right?" The several people who participated in the deity stage team fight actually had one thing in common when they thought about it. They were all losers in the grand competition. Xian Mo lost to He Tu on purpose in the opening match. Swan Xian was defeated by Supreme Tian Luan. Although Xuero Tu narrowly defeated Zhu Shiyao, He was defeated by Zhou Ming in a Yuanying stage fight. Needless to say, Mirage Boy was played around by Wang Wu. As for Bai Zhe, he even lost his position as the deputy in the camp, which was already the shame of Dixian. These people were not weak, but their resumes were really unbearable. Putting these 5 people into a team was simply bad luck. However, it's a bit too much to squeeze out people's lives. Don't look at me, we don't want to kill people here. Who would have thought that your people are so weak that the dignified Dixian died faster than a rabbit? You are the person involved. Is it possible to say that there are no people on your side? I thought you guys should be brothers who share life and death together. How could you guys quickly turn against each other after just half a year of the grand competition? Xianemo looked at Wang Lu in a daze and was silent for a long time. Obviously, he didn't want to say more. Wang Lu was also patient. Xianemo didn't speak, so he just wandered around the hall, rummaging through the ruins caused by the drunken hurricane for Dixian's legacy. He actually found several ancient books of methods that Xianemo read daily. Dixian's products were naturally fine. Wang Lu looked at them with relish and also copied a few copies, intending to sell them when he returned. Wang Wu was more direct. If she saw anything valuable in the ruins, she directly put it into her mustard seed bag without any hesitation. Xianemo was stunned for a long time. Seeing that these 2 people were really good at turning the tables, he shook his head helplessly and said, "The situation is very bad." Wang Lu then stopped writing and asked, "What about the specifics? What is the root cause of the infighting?" After a pause he said, "In the final analysis, our 2 sides are not enemies. In the face of the threat of the fallen immortals, we should cooperate more than compete. Of course we want to win, but we don't want to win this game and lose the teammates that we should unite." Hearing this, Xianemo sighed inwardly, put down some hesitation, and said, "The group of dragons has no leader." "The group of dragons has no leader? You've said this before, but it shouldn't develop to the point of killing each other, right?" Xianemo said, "I didn't expect things to be so serious. But in fact, when this team was first formed, in order to unite all the forces, the composition of Dixian was a bit complicated. As you can see, even the demon race is included, even the slaughtering demon. However, when the boss was there, these problems were not shown. In order to show the sincerity of the alliance, Bai Zhe even took the initiative to abandon his human form. He was the only Dixian who didn't have much killing but degenerated into a demon." Wang Lu was slightly surprised and said, "Unexpectedly, he has some redeeming qualities. When Bai Zhe was the deputy, he was always very competent. It was only after the boss left that he became at a loss. The same is true for the rest of us. When the boss left, most of his most loyal and reliable companions went with him. The rest of us are indeed scattered sand. If there is no one to restrain us, contradictions will inevitably accumulate. Therefore, in accordance with the last wish to build the group of immortal tombs, we pinned our hope on the later generations. Now that I think about it, this resuscitation is really a mistake." Hearing this, Wang Lu roughly understood the problem of the Dixian camp. As Xianemo said, in the absence of a strong leader, internal strife in the Dixian organization was almost inevitable. If there was no grand competition, they would have probably begun to kill each other. How could those who cultivated the awe-inspiring righteousness coexist in harmony with the slaughtering demon? The demon lived by killing. If they killed people for no reason, should the righteous cultivators stop them? Would there be enmity in the future? If there was enmity, should they retaliate? In the absence of a strong person to resolve these contradictions, this team was certainly unstable. At this time, the grand competition organized by the Wanxian League gave them an opportunity to unite. In the early stage of the competition, the overwhelming momentum of the Dixian team also somewhat suppressed the outbreak of contradictions. It was not until Wang Lu began to lead the counterattack and turned the situation around that the contradictions broke out again. And the result of this outbreak was the deity stage team fight. Chapter 701. There were too many things hidden behind that terrible team battle. Why did Xueqi too, who had always been good at saving his life, lose his life in the match? Why did Mirage Boy's illusion technique seem clumsy? Why did Xuan Xian look relieved after his defeat? Why did Xianemo look dispirited at this time? The answer to these questions boiled down to the fact that the internal strife on Dixian's side had reached an unbridled situation, which made people disheartened. The answer was not difficult to guess, But Wang Lu was curious about why no one came forward to intervene in such a serious situation. What is that ruthless black doing? This was also the question that Wang Lu was most concerned about. Xian Mo said with a wry smile. He is the focus of this conflict. Many people questioned his inappropriate strategy in the early stage, which led to the current situation. Later, some people still supported him, while some people fiercely opposed him. When the quarrel reached its climax, they even fought. Wang Lu asked with interest, "Did Black win?" Xian Mo said, "He didn't make a move, and even when he was injured, he restrained himself. Otherwise, he would have been the one to fight in this match." Wang Lu was even more curious. There were casualties? So, Xueqi too and the others. Xian Mo helplessly smiled. They were all injured, otherwise, they wouldn't have played so badly in the match. That's tantamount to saying that you were forced to fight as wounded? It's simply inhumane. Wang Lu frowned, thinking about what this meant. At this time, Wang Wu said in a deep voice, "Who's the boss on your side now?" "It's Tetragon." Wang Lu asked who. "He is one of the generals under the former leader. His inheritance of cultivation method has some connection with the royal soldier sect in the later generations. He is like a raging fire, but he is obstinate and self-opinionated. Unfortunately, his strength is extremely strong. In the past, he was also one of the people who gave the leader quite a headache." "I've never heard you mention it before." Xian Mo felt helpless. "Our two sides are still enemies. Is there a need for me to tell you everything?" However, thinking about the current situation of his faction, Xian Mo shook his head and explained, "Resuscitation was not long ago. Previously, we thought that he had fallen into a deep slumber, so naturally, we wouldn't mention him. This time, after his unexpected resuscitation, he was very dissatisfied with our situation, accusing us of embarrassing Dixian, especially Black and Bai Zhe, and then..." At this point, a sorrowful expression appeared on Xian Mo's face, and he was unwilling to continue speaking. And Wang Lu could also guess what happened later. This Tetragon obviously carried out a purge in a rage, using his powerful martial force to sweep away all the evils. During this period, he naturally formed his own cliques and rapidly expanded the conflict. The Dixian camp was currently at a disadvantage. Although they had a very high cultivation base, they couldn't do anything to a group of later generation cultivators that they looked down upon. Most of them were obviously holding back their anger. Tetragon's overbearing means just catered to this part of the mentality. Therefore, all the original organization managers stepped down, and Tetragon took over the power with a new team with a tough attitude. Then, he forced Xueqi too and the others to participate in the deity stage group battle to wipe away their previous shame. Of course, wiping away the shame was just an excuse. To put it bluntly, it was to eliminate dissidents. This Tetragon was really ruthless. After so many tribulations, there were only a few Dixian people left. Yet when he made his move there were casualties. It was quite ironic to say that this kind of person was related to the inheritance of royal soldier sect. Because although the style of royal soldier sect seemed rough and straightforward, they were very particular about comradeship. It was an absolute taboo to make a move on one's own people. If someone dared to violate it, they would be severely punished. And this Tetragon, as the founder of royal soldier sect, was really ruthless to his own people. It stood to reason that the enemy had internal strife, and such a character who could stir up the wind and rain, the Wanxian League should be celebrating. But how high was Wang Lu's vision? How broad was his mind? Without any sense of gloating, instead, he seriously said, "Do you need us to help you eradicate the tyrant?" Xian Mo was silent for a long time. "This is an internal matter of our Dixian. If outsiders intervene, it would be hard to explain." Wang Lu said, "By now, the people on your side should know that we came to meet you in private. So why do you still care about the melon fields and plum fields?" Hearing this, Xian Mo was slightly startled. Then, he knitted his eyebrows and thought of something. "When you came, did you encounter any obstacles?" Wang Lu also thought of this problem. Previously, he didn't know that the internal strife in Dixian was so serious. He thought that Xian Mo was hospitable and unguarded. Now it seemed that it was not Xian Mo's intention. Even when she was drunk in her own house, she had to rely on the praying mat to sober up, which was also within the calculation of others. "It seems that someone deliberately created a scandal between you and me, in order to further push you out of the circle. Isn't that Tetragon a reckless man without any IQ?" How could he come up with this kind of conspiracy? Isn't it shameful? Xianmo said with a wry smile. Tetragon only has a fiery temperament. He is by no means a reckless man. Otherwise, it would be impossible for him to integrate his people so quickly. Alas, just now I was drinking to drown my sorrows, but unexpectedly, I fell into such a vicious scheme. I think by now, the news of my private meeting with you has already spread. Wang Wu excitedly suggested, in that case, why don't we make it real? I have the telepathic finger, which is very powerful and can help you feel like a fairy. This way, you won't be depressed because others will frame you. Xianmo just pretended not to hear this. In order not to be framed, she simply took the blame herself. Only she could come up with this kind of nonsense idea. Fortunately, the person in charge of the Wanxian League was Wang Lu and not Wang Wu, so Xianmo looked at Wang Lu, waiting for his opinion. Unexpectedly, Wang Lu seemed to be inspired by his master and also suggested, I also think that it is better for you to jump over now. There is no future here in Dixian. Why not jump over and mix with us? As the first person who defected to Dixian, you will enjoy the best treatment, which is far better than being excluded here. Xianmo said helplessly, it is impossible. Nothing is impossible. In any case, sooner or later our two sides will converge. The difference is which side is the leader. But now it seems that if Tetragon gains the upper hand, your end will be worse than losing to the Wanxian League. So in that case, why not surrender as soon as possible? Although we are divided into two camps, Wanxian League and Dixian, to put it bluntly, aren't we all cultivators of 9 regions? Xianmo was silent for a while and then said, no, if I go with you now, no one in the camp can contain Tetragon. In the past, he owes me a favor, so he doesn't dare to be too rude to me. Wang Lu said, since you are the only one who can contain him, then you are simply a thorn in his side. If you stay, he will use all kinds of tricks to smear you with dirty water, and you will end up losing your reputation. Why bother? I know, but I have no choice. You don't know what kind of person he is and what he will do. If there is no one to contain him, it will be a disaster for both sides. Hearing this, Wang Wu waved her hand in annoyance. Why is it so troublesome? In my opinion, it is better to write a letter of challenge to him, invite him to fight one-on-one, and then kill him on the field. Wang Lu sneered. If he really has the ability and courage to fight one-on-one, he should personally participate in the deity transformation stage group battle. Unfortunately, he is just a sinister villain who forces the wounded to fight on the battlefield. Xianmo said, don't underestimate him. Of course he will fight. He will certainly wait for the next martial arts competition. To some extent, he is a person more cruel than black. You must be careful. Wang Lu continued to sneer. Don't worry, as long as he dares to fight, I promise to help you solve this internal hidden danger. After that, the three of them casually talked for a while. After several unsuccessful attempts by Wang Lu, he said goodbye and left. Xianmo's interest waned. He was only sad that his former comrades and companions had turned against each other, and he had no intention to keep Wang Lu and Wang Lu. After leaving Tavern Heaven on Earth, Wang Lu thought for a while and said, there is something fishy about this matter. Wang Wu nodded and said, it is indeed quite strange. There is actually a woman who would refuse my telepathic finger. It is really strange. I feel that it is a bit far-fetched to say that it is a coincidence that a tetragon woke up inexplicably and caused such a big commotion all of a sudden. Wang Wu said, if it is not a coincidence, could it be that someone deliberately ran to his side while he was sleeping and woke him up with a passionate kiss? You are so disgusting. What is the benefit of earning it back? The Dixian camp is in chaos and killing each other, which is completely convenient for us. Wang Wu wanted to make a joke, but when she saw Wang Lu's serious look, she also said seriously, perhaps they just wanted to bring in strong reinforcements at first, but they didn't expect that Tetragon's resuscitation would stir up so much trouble? Moreover, as the old saying goes, there must be great governance after great chaos. This Tetragon is so overbearing and ruthless, probably because he thinks that even at the risk of tragic sacrifice, he must completely integrate the camp's power. If those Dixian can really do what they want, it would not be a good thing for us. In this grand competition, the Wanxian League was able to gain a slight advantage. In addition to Wang Lu's efforts, the Dixian side's power was also an important reason. The leadership of Xianmo and Bai Zhe was not strong, and the black-clad Dixian did not often appear. The Dixian side fought on their own completely by virtue of their superhuman strength. After occupying the initial advantage, it would be very difficult for the Wanxian League to gradually figure out their way and make some targeted arrangements. However, if this tetragon could integrate the power of Dixian and twist it into one, the Wanxian League's days would indeed not be easy. Let's wait and see. Tetragon is a double-edged sword. Before hurting us, I'm afraid they may not be able to bear it themselves. Speaking of which, I still think it's strange. Wang Lu touched his chin and said, I always thought that the number one enemy was black, but now there is suddenly an inexplicable tetragon. This development is too strange. Dixian's resuscitation is inexplicable. Wang Wu spread out her hands and said, it was agreed that he would leave his legacy to future generations, but now that he woke up, he went back on his words and refused to acknowledge it. It's not surprising that this kind of person would do anything. Chapter 702. Regarding the tetragon resuscitation and the Dixian camp began to integrate their forces, Wang Lu immediately fed back to the top management of the organizing committee. Hichu Daoren personally chaired an emergency meeting to discuss countermeasures. After a long discussion for half a day, the conclusion was roughly as follows. First, it was necessary to further strengthen the leadership, establish and implement the relevant responsibility system, and improve the cohesion and combat effectiveness of the Wanxian League team. In short, in the face of emergencies, the Wanxian League must have a stronger response mechanism and leadership. Naturally, Wang Lu was one of the main members of this team. Second, it was necessary to enhance their vigilance, improve their style of work, and resolutely put an end to their lax thinking. In short, it was necessary to keep a low profile from now on. The atmosphere of reveling for 3 days after winning a competition should be stopped in moderation, and some overly optimistic public opinion atmosphere should also be controlled. In fact, even without the tetragon resuscitation, the Wanxian League also had a phenomenon of blind optimism. Many people thought that the Dixian camp was no longer a threat. As long as Wang Lu made his move, they would be invincible. This kind of superstition was undoubtedly a double-edged sword, and now it was necessary to restrain its edge. The advantage of the Wanxian League was not easy to come by. They must not lose it because of a moment of negligence. Third, it was necessary to strengthen the diplomatic contact with Dixian and always keep abreast of the latest developments. In fact, the early work of the Wanxian League was not very effective. It had been half a year since the start of the grand competition, but the official communication channel between the Wanxian League and Dixian was still not smooth. On the one hand, it was because the killing tactics adopted by the Dixian camp in the early stage of the competition had sharply worsened the relationship between the two sides. On the other hand, the situation of the Dixian camp without a leader had also made them unable to establish a real official organization. Therefore, if Wang Lu wanted to meet with Xian Mo, there was no open channel and could only meet in private. The fourth was to try to instigate some of the members of Dixian's camp, such as Xian Mo, Bai Zhe, and Black, who had lost their power. The current situation of the Dixian faction was a coexistence of opportunities and challenges for the Wanxian League. A strong leader like Tetragon could integrate and disperse power. If they could take over the members she abandoned, the strength of the Wanxian League would be greatly enhanced. This task fell on Wang Lu's shoulders. Because the relationship between Wang Lu and Xian Mo had been widely spread in the Wanxian League. During the discussion, the 4 major tasks were assigned to different people. As the chief planner of the organizing committee, Wang Lu was involved in almost all the tasks. However, the most important task was obviously the 4th one, because it was the only one where his role was irreplaceable. There was no shortage of people who were good at planning and design in the Wanxian League. Although Wang Lu was talented in this aspect, he was not necessarily the best in the world. He was only good at being creative and turning the tables in adversity. Now that the Wanxian League had successfully gained the upper hand, as long as the general strategy set by Wang Lu was implemented step by step, it would be fine. Many senior elders could take on this task, and it was not necessary for Wang Lu to do it. However, his relationship with Xian Mo was unique, and Xian Mo's popularity in Dixian was also unique. Through Xian Mo, he could contact Bai Zhe, Black, and the Calculation Immortal. It seemed that it was only a matter of time before many experts among the Earth Immortals joined him. Compared to the first 3 tasks, this task was the least difficult, but the effect was the best. It could be said to be immediate. Therefore, the theme of the meeting gradually became how to use Wang Lu to deal with Xian Mo. As the discussion gradually became more heated, the participating elders were constantly bursting with inspiration, and there were new ideas about how to rope in Xian Mo. From the initial reasoning to emotion, and with Shizhou impassioned speech, it developed to making friends. Seeing that the topic was rapidly falling to the bottom. In this regard, Wang Lu had a different opinion, so he had to interrupt in time. Elders, please listen to me. Wang Lu patted the table, attracting everyone's attention. Please pay attention to a problem. I participate in the organizing committee and serve as the chief planner. There is a basic principle. I, Wang Lu, sell my skills, not my body. As soon as his voice fell, he heard the sect leader of Yin and Yang schools say with a sweet smile, the way of sexual intercourse between men and women is indeed a profound art. Taoist Master Wang Lu is quite knowledgeable. Wang Lu snappily said, then why don't you ask the sect leader to choose a few great artists from the sect to serve Xian Mo? The sect leader said with a smile, how could those good-for-nothings in my sect dare to compare with Taoist Master Wang Lu? Shizhou also advised, Wang Lu, this is a major event related to the overall situation of 9 regions. You must not be emotional. Wang Lu sighed and said, Supreme's high-sounding words are actually just to understand the reproduction situation of modern cultivators and Dixian people, right? Shizhou said with a smile, that's right. The 2 groups of people are separated by the age of chaos, and the laws of heaven and earth are very different. Strictly speaking, we are not even the same species. Whether there is reproductive isolation is worth investigating and studying. Wang Lu said, if you want to investigate and study, please ask Supreme to do it yourself. You are the master of this, so I believe you will be able to do it easily. Shizhou stroked his beard and said, of course I will do it myself, but the first pass still needs you, Taoist Master Wang Lu. Capable people do more work. Please don't refuse. Taoist Master Wang Lu. Don't worry, after you succeed in the first pass, I will meet you as soon as possible and cooperate with you. With my help, you will definitely be able to completely master Xian Mo's body and mind, even if she is Dixian. Wang Lu was shocked. Old man, do you have any shame? Asking for a threesome in full view of the public? While he was still in shock, he heard the master of the Yin and Yang school say with a smile, I have long heard that Shizhou is a master of this, which is very exciting. I wonder if there is an opportunity to compare notes with Supreme? Shizhou coldly snorted. Crooked path. He had always looked down on those cultivators of the Yin and Yang school who were intoxicated with the pleasures of sex but refused to reproduce. The master of the Yin and Yang school said, I know that Supreme has always had a problem with our Yin and Yang school, so we have long planned to change the purpose of our school and do our part for the reproduction of the cultivators of 9 regions. Shizhou raised his white eyebrows. Is that true? The master of the Yin and Yang school said with a charming smile. Whether it's true or not, wouldn't Supreme know if you personally try it? Humph, I do need to try it myself to know if you, a crooked path, really have the heart to change and return to the right path. We are all sincere. You must believe us, true monarch. While the 2 were talking happily, Hichu Daoren coughed, and a tyrannical magical power swept across the conference room, causing everyone's primordial spirit to tremble. Let's end the digression here. Wang Lu thought so too. There is indeed too much gossip. Let's talk about Tetragon. He made up his mind not to talk about selling his body to seduce Xian Mo. As a result, the next moment, Hichu Daoren turned to Wang Lu. Taoist Master Wang Lu, I will have to trouble you with the matter of Xian Mo. F***CK Supreme, you can't trick me like this. As the chief planner of the organizing committee, you have to do a flesh business. Where is the face of the Wanxian League? Hichu Daoren said with a smile. Therefore, you need to use your wisdom and use methods other than flesh business to win the other party over. I believe that with your wisdom, you will definitely find a way. Unexpectedly, Supreme, who is known for being serious and rigid, would also play this trick? Seeing that Hichu Daoren had spoken, an elder in the conference room said with a smile, Taoist Master Wang Lu, your popularity among the female cultivators of the Wanxian League has always been high, and it is not because of flesh business. I believe that this time, you will be able to give full play to your specialty and bring Xian Mo into your pocket. Yes, yes, Taoist Master Wang Lu is famous. In the City of Immortals, I don't know how many female cultivators have shouted that they want to give birth to your child. You must not refuse again. Seeing that the atmosphere in the conference room was gradually unified, Wang Lu inwardly sneered. These envious and jealous faces were really ugly. After the meeting ended, The cultivators who participated in the meeting went back to their respective posts. Part of Wang Lu's work was handed over to Hai Yunfan for the time being, while the rest was distributed to other senior elders. What he had to do was to find a way to capture the fortress of Xianmo. This was very difficult. Otherwise, those elders would not have given this work to Wang Lu, who was suspected of selling his flesh. There was really no one else who could do it except him. After coming out of the conference room, Wang Lu immediately went to the heavenly earth, wanting to see Xianmo again. However, this time, he could not enter the door at all. After putting his hand into the whirlpool of stars, he could not sense the location of the heavenly earth at all. Whether it was Xianmo did not want to see him or Tetragon did not want Xianmo to see him, in short, he could not go to the heavenly earth. Thus, the current situation suddenly became a deadlock. No matter how good the relationship between Wang Lu and Xianmo was, he could only persuade and rope him in by meeting him. Now that he could not even see him, how could he rope him in? Even a more pessimistic prediction was that Xianmo was likely to be defeated by Tetragon as a traitor because of the previous private meetings. But since the Wanxian League had given him the task, he could not give up halfway when he encountered a setback. If he went back and announced that the task had failed, he did not know how many people who liked to gloat would doubt his ability as a man. Therefore, even if it was a deadlock, he had to find a way to stir up some waves. Wang Lu stood in front of the whirlpool of stars for a long time, patiently pondering his plan. When he was about to put it into action, he saw the whirlpool of stars in front of him shaking, and a person walked out of it. "Hey, Bai Zhe." The person who came was the former deputy of the Dixian camp, Bai Zhe, who was good at the negation technique. It was just that when they met again, Bai Zhe looked tired and weary, far from the arrogant and unruly attitude of the past. "Come with me," Bai Zhe lightly said, then turned around and walked away. Without the slightest hesitation, Wang Lu followed. This time, he did not have the #1 king pill in 9 regions as a bodyguard, and it was almost impossible for him to resist and struggle in the face of a Dixian. However, Wang Lu knew very well that Bai Zhe did not come to trouble him, because he held the token of Xianmo in his hand. It was an exquisite hairpin shaped like a plum blossom. The top of the hairpin was divided into 2 prongs, each containing yin and yang immortal spirit. It was the unique immortal method of Xianmo. Chapter 703. I can't believe we meet again so soon. In the middle of an iceberg, Xianmo was holding a fragrant tea in her hand. Her posture was natural and unrestrained, like a pure and clean fairy in the snowstorm. It was just that. There was an unconcealable exhaustion and sadness in her expression. Wang Lu looked around. In the middle of the snowstorm, there was a simple cave made of ice crystal rock that sheltered them from the wind and rain. Xianmo lived in this cave. Is this your new home? The decoration is simple enough. Xianmo let out a wry smile. Why ask when you already know the answer? This was the mysterious Frost World, one of the tens of thousands of small worlds in the group of immortal tombs. It was frozen for thousands of miles, and the vitality was extinguished. It was the temporary refuge for Xianmo, Bai Zhe, and the others. Refuge. Under the inhumane suppression of Tetragon, Xianmo's good popularity finally could not play its role, and she was forced into a dead end. Either she was persecuted to death by Tetragon for various reasons, or she knelt down and became a dog for Tetragon. Xianmo was a cultivator whose cultivation base had reached the peak, so she was proud and arrogant. The dignified Dixian would never become a dog for others. However, she didn't want to die in the hands of Tetragon, so she had to choose to escape. There were tens of thousands of small worlds in the group of immortal tombs. If Xianmo wanted to escape, it would be difficult for Tetragon to catch her. However, your escape is basically equivalent to breaking your own foundation. In the Dixian camp, you are an extremely dishonorable deserter. Xianmo looked at Wang Lu. Isn't this exactly what you want? Wang Lu bluntly smiled. Yes, I was ordered by the Wanxian League organizing committee to instigate you. Now it seems that I have come at the right time. Xianmo shook her head. If you think that I will change my camp now, you are too optimistic. If I really wanted to betray the Dixian faction, I wouldn't be hiding here. Instead, I would have gone over to your side. If I wanted to leave, Tetragon wouldn't have been able to stop me. Wang Lu said, if you're so stupid that you still don't know how to switch sides, then there's really no need to rope you in. Xianemo nodded. Then please go back. I will not abandon my identity as Dixian. Wang Lu smiled. I don't expect you to abandon your Dixian identity and join the Wanxian League. You don't have to join the Wanxian League to switch factions. Xianemo was curious. Other than Dixian and Wanxian League, are there other factions? Are you working for a third party? At this point, Xianmo's expression suddenly turned cold. Fallen immortal? Thinking of this, Xianmo was suddenly shocked. If it were not for the fallen immortal, how could 9 regions, which had experienced the age of chaos, give birth to such a genius? If it were not for the fallen immortal, how could so many of her companions die in his hands? If it were not for... While Xianmo was thinking, she suddenly felt something warm on her forehead. She was hit by something warm and soft. She was shocked and thought it was a unique hidden weapon. However, the next moment, the hidden weapon fell from her forehead and slipped past her eyes. It was a bun. But, why was it a bun? In front of her, Wang Lu angrily looked at her and said, "This is the snack that I usually prepare for junior sister. Today, I'll give it to you to nourish your brain." Did you just think about the fallen immortal? Xianmo's mind was seen through, but she was not embarrassed. She wiped the oil stains on her forehead with a handkerchief and then carefully wrapped the meat bun. She said calmly, "Yes, I do doubt you. Now, apart from the Wanxian League and us, where else is there a third party? You can't be working for the Western continent people." Wang Lu sighed and said, "Use your brain. How could a person like me be a lackey? The fallen immortals can't buy me. We've known each other for so long. Haven't you seen my unyielding character?" Xianmo declined to comment. Seeing that the other party had no understanding, Wang Lu had to make it clearer. It's very simple. The third party I'm talking about refers to myself. If you don't want to switch to the Wanxian League, you might as well join me. Xianmo was speechless for a long time. Are you trying to make me happy? Wang Lu said, I'm serious. Xianmo was finally shocked by Wang Lu's amazing boldness. A mere king pill stage young man who had only cultivated for more than 30 years actually told a Dixian to follow him. What kind of boldness or face did he need to do that? Even Xianmo's immortal heart that had not been moved for thousands of years was shocked. He accidentally squeezed the meat bun in his hand until the oil flowed out. Again, use your brain, my senior Xianmo. Now that you're joining a camp, do you need to focus on strength? The fallen immortal camp is the strongest. Do you want to join them? Xianmo retorted, but since you put yourself in the same position as the Wanxian League and Dixian, calling yourself the third-party force, at least the difference in strength can't be too big, right? Why not? The Wanxian League claims to be equal to all immortals, but do you think a behemoth like Shengjing sect can be mentioned in the same breath as the Seven Star sect? There are hundreds of millions of countries in 9 regions. Among them, the large countries cover hundreds of millions of miles, while the small countries have a population of thousands of people. How much difference is there? Aren't they collectively known as 9 regions and 10,000 countries? Xianmo shook his head and disagreed. You're just twisting words and forcing logic. After a pause he continued, I can't promise you anything, but at least for now, I, Bai Zhe, and Lu Biechen will not appear in the grand competition again. That should be enough for you, right? Tetragon may be able to integrate the strength of the remaining people, but those people are not enough to guarantee the victory of the grand competition. Some people are irreplaceable. Speaking to this, he remembered that many irreplaceable companions had died in the internal strife, and the grand competition, which originally had a high chance of winning, had gradually declined. He could not help but sigh. What was going on here? Seeing that Xianmo's attitude was firm, Wang Lu no longer entangled with him. If the matter of instigating defection could be successful, then so be it. If not, then there was no need to force it. Not to mention that if it was just a few words, he would have to doubt Xianmo's intention. This time, in addition to instigating defection, there are several things that I want you to do, Wang Lu said, and then his expression gradually became solemn. The first thing is, what is Black doing now? This was the most important question in Wang Lu's mind. No matter how others looked at it, Wang Lu always felt that the black-clad Dixian was the real trouble. This tetragon, who suddenly appeared and disrupted everyone's rhythm, was like a passerby. There was not much evidence for this conclusion. It was purely Wang Lu's intuition. However, he felt that his intuition was credible, so the first thing he did was to ask about Black's whereabouts. He also hid, Xianemo said. Tetragon attacked him the most ruthlessly. After resuscitation, he almost killed him on the spot. Wait, Wang Lu interrupted. I remember you said that Black was extremely strong, but he was actually killed on the spot? What is the background of this Tetragon? Xianemo said, I don't know. Tetragon was not so strong at that time. I don't know why he became stronger after he woke up this time. Okay, go on. After Black was seriously injured, he went into hiding. Tetragon couldn't find him several times. Later, he took the initiative to contact me and told me the location of this place. He said that among the countless small worlds, it is both stable and hidden, and can be used to hide when the situation is extremely unfavorable. In other words, your current position is not really safe? At the same time, Black has successfully hidden in the dark and controlled everything. This position change is really smooth. Xianemo did not get it. Are you suspecting Black? He is not the kind of person who will betray his companions. Although his style of doing things is a bit extreme. But compared to Tetragon, he is much better. Wang Lu did not argue, only said, Do you have a way to contact him? Xianemo hesitated for a moment and said, Black said that if there is something, he will look for me, but he did not leave any contact information. Wang Lu looked at her, thinking that most likely he did leave, but he told her not to tell others. But since she knew it was good, there will be a chance in the future to pry it out from her mouth. The second question is about Tetragon. Please tell me in detail. Xianemo looked at Wang Lu, but did not speak. Wang Lu knew what she was worried about. After all, Tetragon was her former comrade, a companion of the Dixian camp. But Wang Lu belonged to the Wanxian League camp. Internal and external contradictions must be distinguished. So Wang Lu advised, Tetragon is our common enemy. Only by getting rid of him can we both have the possibility of coexistence in harmony. You should be very clear about this. Wanxian League and Dixian are not enemies, but those who hinder our common cause are enemies. Hearing this, Xianemo finally wavered. The woman's eyes flickered for a long time and slowly said, Tetragon is a very special person. However, after saying a sentence, suddenly, the wind and snow outside the cave stopped, the clouds suddenly opened, and a majestic purple gas symbolizing the supremacy fell from the sky. At the same time, a magnificent and dignified voice echoed in the mysterious frost world. Xianemo, you really disappointed me. Xianemo was shocked, stood up and said, Tetragon? Chapter 704. That's Tetragon? Hearing Xianmeo's exclamation, Wang Lu was also very surprised. That's Tetragon? The devil incarnate who suddenly resuscitated from his deep sleep and disrupted everyone's rhythm? The tyrant who beat Xianemo, Bai Zhe, Lu Biechen, and even Black Shirt Dixian into stray dogs? In his field of vision, he could not see Tetragon's real body clearly. He could only see the vast sea of clouds suddenly open up, and a purple gas poured down like a jade pillar, dyeing most of the sky a thick purple. The sound of the golden bell reverberated from the jade pillar, sweeping across the snowy land. After a moment, the purple gas was like a thorn, hurting people's eyes, and Wang Lu could not help but lower his head. Behind him, Swan Xian Lu Biechen explained to Wang Lu, Tetragon is born in the royal family, and is born with the emperor's purple gas. Those who are slightly weaker cannot even look up to its glory. Lu Biechen explained with good intentions, but as soon as his voice fell, his face changed, and then a trace of golden blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. What a domineering emperor's aura! And unknowingly committed the crime of talking nonsense about the emperor. Lu Biechen shook his head, sorry, I can't say more. Of course, Wang Lu was not in the mood to listen for the time being. The enemy was already at the door. What was the point of listening to gossip? The opponent was Tetragon, who could force a group of people into a dead end, and was no longer someone that he, the immortal King Pill, could contend with the advantage of information. The key was to see how Xianemo would deal with it. Tetragon, do you have to be so ruthless? The woman's face was a little pale, but under the pressure of the emperor's purple gas, she was neither servile nor overbearing. I hide here with my companions because we don't want to kill each other, don't be too aggressive. Tetragon's voice reverberated in the sky once more. If I insist on forcing you, how could I allow you to hide? You guys stay here quietly. I won't pay attention to you. But you actually dared to leak my affairs to outsiders. This is undoubtedly a betrayal. The word betrayal was like a thunderclap. Xueqi stood at the entrance of the cave and immediately propped up a small world. However, the emperor's golden words instantly shattered this world. The aftershocks shook Wang Lu so much that he was dazed and saw stars. Hey, control your power. Don't hurt innocent bystanders. Unfortunately, Wang Lu's voice was soon drowned out by the conversation between Dixian. Tetragon, do you really want to start a war? No matter how good Xueqi's temper was, he couldn't hold back his anger. Just now, she propped up a small world to protect Wang Lu, but it was instantly destroyed by Tetragon. It was not that her strength was too weak, but she never thought that the opponent would really be so ruthless. The destruction of Dixian's small world would not cause irreparable harm to him, but there were hundreds of millions of creatures in a small world, all of whom were Dixian's companions for countless years. Destroying a small world was like cutting off one's arm, which was already an extremely ruthless method. Tetragon's cold and ruthless voice sounded in the air. This is not a war, this is a punishment. After that, the purple gas column that penetrated the clouds suddenly expanded, as if it was going to penetrate the entire mysterious frost world. Xueqi's face changed, and he looked at the people behind him. Do it. Lu Biechen sighed and threw out the calculation token in his hand. Tetragon has made up his mind to kill. There is no other choice. Do it. Xueqi Baizhe also expressed a rare affirmative opinion. Didn't you prepare for so long to fight with Tetragon? Do it. In the cave, the rest of the Dixian also spoke one after another. So Xueqi began to act. The woman raised her hands slightly. There was no movement, but the mysterious frost world began to rumble and tremble. In an instant, the 10,000-year-old mysterious ice under everyone's feet cracked, and countless cracks bloomed. Through the smooth ice wall, the cracks could be seen to be bottomless. In the next moment, the entire mysterious frost world was like an orange squeezed by a huge force. It began to twist and deform rapidly, and the pulp was squeezed until juice dripped. Countless smooth ice walls were squeezed by a powerful force and collided with each other. Large pieces of mysterious ice shattered into countless tiny residues. The mysterious frost world collapsed, the earth cracked, and everything collapsed. At the same time, a clear dragon roar shocked the whole world. Wang Lu barely maintained himself in the collapse of the mysterious frost world. At this time, he only felt that this dragon roar was familiar, but in the next moment, he was forced to panic by a collapsed iceberg pressing down on his head, and had no time to distinguish the dragon roar. After Wang Lu used the chaotic heaven-splitting sword Qi to split a mountain into countless pieces, he finally remembered that he had heard this sound when he entered Xueqi's tavern Heaven on Earth not long ago. However, what this dragon roar meant remained to be seen. After a while, Wang Lu finally cleaned up all the surging mysterious ice around him. The ice of the mysterious frost world was stronger than the mysterious iron of the mortal world, and had a trace of the power of heaven and earth that could freeze everything. It was not easy to deal with. After Wang Lu settled down a little, he could finally spare some energy to watch the battle. It was not easy to watch the battle, because the battlefield was far above the ninth heaven, outside the mysterious frost world, and it had long been hidden in the mist of ice fragments. In addition, Wang Lu's side was full of glittering mysterious ice fragments, and his line of sight had long been cut into pieces. Only by using primordial spirit could he barely observe the edge of the battlefield. And the risk of using primordial spirit to explore the battle of Dixian level was self-evident. Wang Lu carefully released his primordial spirit and carefully felt the messy spiritual energy fluctuations around him, so as to reverse infer the situation of the battle. Gradually, a clear image began to form in his mind. A dragon, a four-clawed ice dragon with a body length of thousands of miles. It was the first time for Wang Lu to see such a huge creature. Before this, the dragon race in 9 regions had almost died out, but there were still some evil flood dragons in many deep valleys and ponds. The story of the dragon could be traced back to before the Age of Chaos. However, according to the historical records, even before the Age of Chaos, when the dragon race was in its heyday, there was no such huge ice dragon. For creatures with high enough cultivation base, it was not difficult to change their shape. For example, it was easy to make themselves bigger or smaller. With Wang Lu's current cultivation base, he could try to transform into a 300 meters tall giant, but it would not have any practical significance. Too big a body meant that it was easier to be killed, and it would not bring about the evolution of power. In the same way, Many spirit beasts who were born with huge bodies, after their cultivation base reached a certain level, most of them would choose to transform into human form. It was not only because it was the most beneficial for human cultivation, but also because they wanted a relatively small body. Therefore, in theory, too big a body was not conducive to fighting. However, in Wang Lu's mind, this thousands of miles-long four-clawed ice dragon was full of fighting spirit, crazily biting the opponent, forcing the opponent to retreat step by step. The opponent was naturally Tetragon. Unfortunately, under the perception of primordial spirit, Tetragon's real body was still not visible. He could only vaguely see a mass of purple light, which was also huge, which was exactly the same size as the thousands of miles-long dragon. Without the explanation of Lu Biechen, Wang Lu could also guess that the bigger the better. As for the disadvantageous situation that might be encountered in the fight, the experts would not think so much about it. Moreover, with the peerless power of Tetragon, there was indeed no need to worry about the size difference. With his powerful strength, he could directly crush the opponent, and there would be few opponents. However, no one could imagine that Xian Mo had a dragon in his hand that was no less powerful than Tetragon. What was the origin of this dragon? How could he compete with a peerless figure among the Earth immortals? Moreover, it seemed that it was clearly controlled by Xian Mo. If this kind of heaven-defying thing was released earlier, perhaps the situation in the grand competition would be different. While Wang Lu's thoughts turned sharply, the ice dragon and Tetragon outside the mysterious frost world had been fighting fiercely. Both sides were the top powerhouses in the world, but they were outputting their power in the simplest and most direct way. There was neither a mysterious immortal method nor a strange immortal tool. The ice dragon did not even need to spit. It simply used its sharp claws and teeth and its powerful body covered with scales to hurt the enemy. And every time it bit or pounced on the enemy's head, it would make the purple cloud where Tetragon was tremble violently. Tetragon was like a sea urchin. In the circular purple cloud, beams of light rushed out madly, like a spear, and stabbed the ice dragon, setting off a series of scales, and then cutting the muscles. Blood gushed out like a fountain, pouring down in the mysterious frost world. Everyone stood on the ruins of the mysterious frost world and watched the battlefield nervously. In particular, Xuan Xian and Lu Biechen constantly threw out calculations and deduced the situation of the battle. There were many Dixian who could not see the development of the battle, so they came to Lu Biechen's side and listened to his analysis. Unfortunately, Lu Biechen just shook his head. "I can't see it clearly. Originally, there should be a 90% chance of winning, but just now when I deduced, I found that the chance of winning began to waver, and the future gradually dimmed." "How could that be?" "That's a G-saurus." Wang Lu heard it clearly and immediately asked, "What is a G-saurus?" The Dixian who asked the question was startled. He looked at Wang Lu, was silent for a while, and then replied, "G-saurus is one of the foundations of the existence of the group of immortal tombs. It is the guardian of each independent small world, and it can also be said to be that small world itself. The specific principle is difficult to explain to you in a few words. But you have to know that every G-saurus, after resuscitation, has great power. And this four-clawed ice dragon is a first-class powerhouse in the countless small worlds of the group of immortal tombs." "Stronger than you, the creators?" "Stronger than us, if we are stupid enough to fight with G-saurus head-on. The defect of G-saurus is that it is impossible to be awakened for a long time. After a period of time, it will naturally fall asleep. Moreover, the longer the resuscitation, the longer it needs to sleep. Therefore, as long as we avoid a head-on confrontation and wander around for a while, we can naturally win. There's no need to fight head-on." "But Tetragon would never fight like that." Wang Lu nodded. "So you guys use this trick to deal with Tetragon? But why do I feel that this trick is a bit useless?" While they were talking, the battle outside the mysterious frost finally came to an end. As the purple bald head once again thrust out its sharp edge, this sharp edge also slightly slashed to the side, and the G-saurus was almost cut in half on the spot. A miserable dragon cry shook the whole world. In an instant, all the mysterious ice within a radius of thousands of miles exuded a dark red color, as if it was weeping blood. A moment later, the four-clawed ice dragon curled up, coiled into a ball, and then disappeared. The mysterious frost world was deathly silent. The Dixian looked at all this with livid faces, and their hearts were like dead ashes. Chapter 705. G-saurus was the only trump card in the hands of Xian Mo and other fugitive Dixian people. It was also their only hope. In theory, this magical creature had the strength to contend against a low-level fallen immortal in a short period of time, which was tyrannical and peerless. However, this hope disappeared in front of everyone. Gisaurus was killed by Tetragon head-on. Under the shroud of the Emperor's purple chi, the boundless atmosphere of fear spread throughout the mysterious frost world. How is this possible? Lu Biechan looked at the calculation chips on the ground with a pale face. He had calculated thousands of times, but he didn't expect such a thing to happen. Tetragon was already strong enough to kill Gisaurus head-on? When did this guy become so strong? If he had such ability, why didn't Tetragon show it at the beginning? After this resuscitation, Tetragon's temperament changed greatly, as if he was another person. Wait, another person. A flash of inspiration flashed in Lu Biechan's mind, as if he had thought of something. Unfortunately, there was no time for him to think so much now. The purple chi in the sky was getting thicker, as if brewing the next wave of the Emperor's wrath. Tetragon was really tyrannical, far beyond people's imagination. At this point, there was really no power to reverse the situation. I'm sorry to implicate you. Lu Biechan sighed and said to Wang Lu beside him. This was an internal strife in Dixian, but it accidentally implicated the people of Wanxian League. Although the two sides were hostile not long ago, now that Lu Biechan and others were also traitors in Dixian camp, he felt that Wang Lu was much more pleasing to the eye. Wang Lu himself didn't care and said, "It doesn't matter, you don't have to be so polite. Things are not that bad yet." Lu Biechan said, "Tetragon won't be merciful to you just because you're not on the Dixian side. That guy might not follow the rule of not killing envoys in a war between two countries." Wang Lu smiled and said, "I'm not that naive. I said it's okay because Tetragon is already a spent force." Lu Biechan forced a smile and said, "However, in front of Tetragon, the few of us may not be able to match up to Lu Pang." After witnessing the collapse of the World Dragon, these earthly immortals were truly disheartened and had completely lost the will to fight. Wang Lu still smiled and said, "Senior Swan Xian, although your arithmetic didn't work when you calculated Tetragon, you don't have to be so discouraged that you even abandon your own craft. Pick up your arithmetic stick and calculate again. If you can't calculate it, it's time for the Oriole to take action." The mantis stalks the cicada, unaware of the Oriole behind. Was there someone lying in ambush behind the fierce battle between Tetragon and Gisaurus? Roar! Another clear dragon roar pierced through the purple clouds and passed into the mysterious frost realm. Lu Biechan opened his eyes wide and looked up at the sky in disbelief. The arithmetic stick in his hand trembled slightly and said, "This is another Gisaurus? Black, it's black?" Outside the mysterious frost realm, a huge black dragon, which was even bigger than the four-clawed ice dragon, pounced over with a ferocious face. Tetragon said angrily, "Black, how dare you cover up for the traitor?" This Tetragon was indeed a descendant of the Emperor's noble family. At that time, he had personally beaten his opponent and had to flee far away. At this time, he even questioned why Black would cover up for Xianemo. If he didn't cover up for Xianemo, would he really wait for him to defeat everyone one by one and cover up the sky with one hand? In a rage, Tetragon fought with the black dragon until blood flowed like a river. However, after all, he had just experienced a fierce battle and was not strong enough. Soon, he was bitten by the black dragon, and the purple light swayed. "Black, from today onwards, you are my #1 enemy. Last time I showed mercy, but the next time we meet, it will be your death." After that, the purple light flashed away. Outside the mysterious frost realm, the black dragon laughed wildly after winning, and humiliated Tetragon's back to its heart's content. After a while, the black dragon nodded slightly at the mysterious frost realm, and its figure also flashed away. On the ice field, about 7 or 8 Dixian walked out of the ruins, staring at the sky blankly, with a blank expression. "Black, is he gone?" Lu Biechan sighed. Black didn't come at all. He was seriously injured. How could he recover so quickly? He sent his own Gisaurus over. As he spoke, Xianemo descended from the sky, and with a pale face, he added, "However, Black's Gisaurus couldn't make Tetragon stay when it appeared, and its aura must be locked on. The next time it makes a move, Tetragon will be able to follow the aura to find Black. Black sacrificed himself to save us." How did Tetragon become so strong? A fleeing Dixian was full of despair. When Tetragon regroups and makes a comeback, What should we do? The companion next to the Dixian was also full of despair. If I had known this would happen, I would have stayed. Tetragon didn't say that he was going to trouble me. Someone next to him was suddenly annoyed. No one begged you to come. You were the one who was scared to death of Tetragon and stuck your nose to him. Now you say that you regret it. Are you shameless? Xianemo said, stop arguing. Just now, Tetragon's Emperor Purple aura shocked the mysterious Frost world. Everyone's mind was shaken, so it's reasonable for you to say something delirious. This sentence was intended to smooth things over, but the next sentence was a bit tough. But in any case, please remember that once you choose this path, there is no possibility of turning back. Tetragon will not accept traitors. After barely stabilizing the morale of the army with a few words, Xianemo found Wang Lu again. I'm sorry to implicate you this time. Tetragon is headstrong and self-opinionated, but he is very careful. He must have found you just now, and I'm afraid he will harm you in the future. Wang Lu smiled. Even if I didn't come today, will Tetragon let me go? After all, I am also a high-level member of the Wanxian League. It would be strange if I wasn't regarded as a thorn in their side. But if you really feel that you owe me, you might as well jump to my side. Xianemo looked at him helplessly. This topic has just been discussed. Wang Lu said seriously. The treatment is negotiable. Don't joke, okay? Wang Lu said, it's not a joke. I am taking advantage of the situation. Think about it carefully. The trump card in your hand has been torn, and the trump card of black has been used once, so it won't work the next time. Tetragon doesn't treat you as his own people, only as traitors, so it's better to be a real traitor and really betray for everyone to see. Wang Lu said, betray? What an interesting phrase. Could it be that you're a loyal dog now? Leaving the master is tantamount to betrayal? How can you have the nerve to say such a thing? Xianemo, you left Tetragon because you don't want to be a dog, so why bother to lock yourself in the doghouse? Xianemo was suddenly speechless. The Wanxian League and your Dixian are not life and death enemies. We are just opponents in the competition. But Tetragon obviously can't coexist with anyone. With such a person, our plan to join hands to fight against the fallen immortals is just a joke. Do you understand? Xianemo was speechless. Can you let me think about it? Wang Lu said, yes, then while you are thinking about it, I happen to have some questions to ask. Wang Lu's question was about Gisaurus. Wang Lu was very interested in this creature that was thousands of miles long and could accommodate a small world. Before that, he could only see such a huge creature in the ancient books and records of the Age of Desolation. The Age of Desolation was born in the primal chaos, and there were all kinds of strange creatures. However, as the creatures of 9 regions multiplied and the civilization evolved, those magical creatures gradually disappeared, and the era of human beings occupied 9 regions. Wang Lu didn't think that those Gisaurus were creatures of the Age of Desolation. They had a very strong aura of human cultivators, so they were obviously human creations. However, if the Dixian could create such a big killing weapon, even if the use was very limited, the battle against the fallen immortals should be a different situation. Listening to Wang Lu's question, Xianemo seemed a bit embarrassed, because Gisaurus was related to the secret of the entire group of immortal tombs. It stood to reason that only after the grand competition ended and the Wanxian League won a great victory could they take over this secret. However, when he thought that a part of this major secret disappeared in the hands of Tetragon, Xianmo's insistence slightly loosened. These Gisaurus can only live in the group of immortal tombs. They are part of the group of immortal tombs. Once the beginning was made, the following words were logical. Xianmo explained, these Gisaurus are the foundation of the group of immortal tombs. We built the entire group of immortal tombs through Gisaurus. At first, they were just a kind of creature that we accidentally discovered. They are very weak, but they have incredible magical abilities. They can accommodate a world in their body. This world is very fragile and unreal, like a gorgeous illusion. However, this illusion itself is very meaningful. We studied it for a long time before we gradually found a way to use this magical ability. Among them, the illusionary child had spent the most time and had also benefited greatly from it. His illusionary immortal technique had been perfected by referring to the universe inside the world dragon's body. Later on, when we failed to fight against the fallen immortals, we began to look for a way out and prepared to leave our legacy for the future generations. It was also Mirage Boy who first proposed to use the internal world of Gisaurus. That was really an admirable genius idea. Unfortunately, Mirage Boy himself has. After sighing, Xianemo continued to tell her story. Now, these Gisaurus are the product of our transformation of the primordial species. We removed all the valves in Gisaurus's body that limited its growth. Then, we connected the feng shui line of the 9 regions with it and directly used the incomparably vigorous feng shui line of spiritual energy to support the creatures, so that Gisaurus could grow indefinitely. As the size of Gisaurus continues to expand, the internal world can also become extremely large, and eventually infinitely close to the real world. Of course, there are many complicated steps, but there is no need to explain them in detail here. In short, the foundation of the group of immortal tombs is Gisaurus. Wang Lu nodded. In short, the group of immortal tombs is actually a breeding farm? That being the case, there should be a lot of Gisaurus, right? Not that many. It is very difficult for Gisaurus to reproduce. Right now, the total number of Gisaurus in the group of immortal tombs is not that many. Among them, there are very few that are as powerful as the Black Frost Gisaurus. Moreover, these Gisaurus are not natural products. Once they leave the environment of the group of immortal tombs, they will die instantly. Therefore, they do not have any actual combat value. Unless the fallen immortals take the initiative to attack us, we can use them to fight against the enemy. Wang Lu raised a question, but in the group of immortal tombs, there are thousands of worlds, large and small. Moreover, there is a cycle of destruction and rebirth. What is the reason for this? Xianemo said, Gisaurus are divided into 2 kinds. One is that the universe inside its body is fixed and unchanging, and the other is ever-changing. Each has its own advantages and disadvantages. The latter is mainly used to provide you with trials and treasures. Wang Lu thought for a moment and then asked, the number of cultivators who participate in the group of immortal tombs at the same time can be more than millions at most, and each of them will enter its corresponding independent world. Xianemo interrupted. That's because some Gisaurus can accommodate more than one world inside its body. The world for your trial doesn't need to be particularly stable. The total number of Gisaurus is indeed not that many. Wang Lu smiled. No, I want to ask, how many of these millions of people can enter the universe inside the body of the first kind of Gisaurus? After a pause, Wang Lu said, if I'm not mistaken, your real inheritance is in the body of the first kind of Gisaurus, right? Chapter 706. Wang Lu had long speculated that the immortal dreamlands in the group of immortal tombs could be roughly divided into 2 types. One was completely randomly generated, with a variety of contents and a variety of rewards. In the early stage of the group of immortal tombs, most of the immortal dreamlands experienced by the cultivators were of this type. The other type was relatively fixed and unique in content, and its existence had a very clear purpose: inheritance. The 5 Blood Spirit Crown power struggle that Wang Lu participated in was a typical example. The entire immortal dreamland was designed by Lan to inherit the 5 Blood Spirit Crown. Later, the heavenly world was also the same. In essence, it was Xianmo's mausoleum, which stored Xianmo's life savings. The fairy-grade flying sword Rouge Tears was one of them. At the same time, because the treasures in the second type of immortal dreamland were not forged by condensing the surrounding spiritual energy, they did not need to abide by the principle of equivalent exchange. For example, the difficulty of Wang Lu and his disciple in getting through the heavenly earth was actually much lower than that of Rouge Tears. After experiencing the second type of immortal dreamland several times, Wang Lu had judged that the existence of the group of immortal tombs was not to provide a crafting furnace for future generations, but rather an additional function of the group of immortal tombs. The real meaning of this place was to select the right successor, to pass on the real precious resources in the hands of Dixian, so that they could fight against the fallen immortals in the future. After the recovery of Dixian, this conjecture was confirmed. However, the core resources in the hands of Dixian had never appeared. Although Rouge Tears and several immortal treasures of the same level were precious, they were far from being able to compete with the core treasures of Dixian. The Earth Immortals had treasured it for thousands of years and regarded it as the only hope to turn the tables. It was definitely not just a few immortal treasures. This kind of thing was in the hands of the Earth Immortals, and the fallen immortals would only have more. Their cultivation base was higher, their resources were richer, and their treasures would, of course, crush the fallen immortals. And the Dixian would not be unable to understand this, so what was the trump card in their hands? It had been half a year since the start of the grand competition. In terms of points, the gap between the Wanxian League and their opponents was not big. It was possible to overtake them at any time and surpass them. The dawn of victory in the competition was already in sight. But to this day, no one could say clearly what they would win if they won in the end. This was both normal and abnormal. Since it was the trump card that the Dixian were relying on to turn the tables, they naturally couldn't reveal it casually. If something were to happen, who could bear the responsibility? Even until the end of the grand competition and the victory of the Union of 10,000 Immortals, the Earth Immortals would only share these cards to a limited extent. Unless, from the beginning of the grand competition, the Union of 10,000 Immortals completely crushed the opponent, leaving no victory points for the opponent. What was unusual was that even if the Dixian wanted to hide their trump cards, how could they do so? So far, no Dixian had ever walked out of the Tombs of Immortals. And after a long period of development, the Tombs of Immortals had been highly open. Almost all the immortal dreamlands could be freely entered. At least on the galaxy map, most of the areas had been visible. However, there was no place that was suspected to have hidden precious props. There was no need to really enter this kind of place. As long as it was found in the whirlpool of stars, it could not be directly entered, and it was heavily guarded. Or a place that was far away from other areas was worthy of suspicion. Unfortunately, so far, it had not been found at all. Now that he thought about it, it was probably because the map in Zhong Shengming's hand was not complete. At first, the Dixian invited Zhong Shengming to join them, but Zhong Shengming's performance was somewhat ambiguous. Thus, the Dixian did not give him full trust and left the bottom secret. The place where the Dixian hid their treasure was not shown on the map at all. Therefore, it was impossible to find the relevant area according to the existing clues. Wang Lu had already guessed this step, so he simply probed by asking, "Your real inheritance is in the first kind of Gisaurus, right?" Sure enough, Xian Mo did not have any doubt and nodded. "This is," halfway through his words, he abruptly stopped. Xian Mo's reaction was also very fast. However, after he stopped, he helplessly shook his head. His performance just now was already a confession. Wang Lu, this guy was really insidious. He completely took advantage of the fact that he was somewhat absent-minded and suddenly set him up, causing him to reveal a big secret. The treasure that was hidden in the deepest part was the greatest secret. Merely its existence itself was something that only a few earthly immortals knew about. Because of his carelessness, his secret was exposed by Wang Lu. This was simply the shame of a lifetime. She had always trusted him so much. The culprit, Wang Lu, looked at her with a smile. "I say, since we have already violated the taboo, we might as well do it again. You can take all the secrets and come to us." You actually have the nerve to say this kind of shameless words. However, on second thought, Xian Mo had some thoughts of abandoning himself to despair. After experiencing the battle with Tetragon, he was completely unable to join the Dixian camp, so he might as well. But soon, Xian Mo thought, if he really did that, what would be the reaction of Tetragon? Would he regard the Wanxian League as his mortal enemy? If that was the case, it would be a disaster for the entire 9 regions. Tetragon was very strong, not only in terms of individual strength, but more importantly, Tetragon now represented the Dixian camp, followed by most of the Dixian camp. If Tetragon refused to cooperate, then the cooperation between the Wanxian League and the Dixian camp would be empty talk. So far, Tetragon did not reject the cooperation with the Wanxian League. He just emphasized that he must hold the dominant position in his own hands. Therefore, he expressed anger at the successive defeats of the Dixian camp not long ago. At the same time, Tetragon was not a villain who went back on his words. He was willing to abide by the basic rules of the grand competition. In other words, Tetragon would strive for victory. But if he really lost, he would not break the contract. In fact, he could not break the contract. At the opening ceremony of the grand competition, almost all the Dixian camp had placed their immortal spirits on the 9 regions map. Once the two sides were separated, Tetragon would immediately become a lone commander. However, if Tetragon thought that the Wanxian League actively violated the agreement and interfered with the internal affairs of the Dixian, then it could reasonably suspend the grand competition and then regard all the members of the Wanxian League as enemies. Tetragon's character had always been black and white, and he did not know how to compromise at all. When the boss was still alive, Tetragon was like this. Now, after the unexpected resuscitation, his character seemed to have become more extreme. If the Wanxian League was included in the list of enemies, it would never be withdrawn. And that must be the situation that the fallen immortals would like to see the most. Thinking of this, Xian Mo's idea of changing camp faded. He looked at Wang Lu and said helplessly, "I can't be with you." When Wang Lu heard this, he smiled and said, "What's stopping us?" Xianemo looked at Wang Lu with clear and guilt-inducing eyes. Wang Lu then changed the topic. "Are you worried about Tetragon? In that case, we might as well continue what we haven't finished just now. What kind of person is Tetragon?" "Sorry, I'm not in the mood to talk now, and it's not the time to talk. Tetragon is not a very patient person and may come back at any time. You'd better leave early." Wang Lu thought that this was indeed reasonable. This time, the harvest was rich enough. He learned about the situation of the Dixian camp, saw the fierce battle between Tetragon and Gisaurus, and confirmed the existence of the secret treasure of Dixian. These news must be returned to the Wanxian League as soon as possible. In that case, I'll take my leave first. I hope that the next time we meet, we can be in the same camp. Xianemo said, "We have always been in the same camp. The camp against the fallen immortals." "Well said." Wang Lu cupped his hands toward Xianemo, and then rode Rouge Tears, rose into the air, and left the mysterious frost world. When the flying sword crossed the sky of the mysterious frost world, it could be clearly seen that the once clear and clean earth had been covered with cracks and was filled with the color of death and defeat. Xianemo said that the small worlds in the Tomb of Immortals were the inner worlds of Gisaurus. Now that the mysterious frost Gisaurus was dead, this world also died. No wonder Gisaurus could not be used as a biological weapon. Not to mention the lack of fighting ability of this creature, the price of death was too tragic. Fortunately, the mysterious frost world was just a refuge for Xianemo. If it was her treasure house, it would be like this. Thinking of this, Wang Lu suddenly had a flash of inspiration and thought of a very important thing. However, just as this idea came to mind, before he had time to peek deeper into it, he heard a cold snort coming from the front. "Stop." Upon hearing this, Wang Lu was shocked and immediately put away all his reverie. The king pill in his jade mansion crazily rotated, and all his true yuan was output to the Rouge Tears under his feet. His primordial spirit was connected with the sword spirit Autumn Beam. Together, they controlled the sword, bringing the small and light characteristics of Rouge Tears to the limit. Although limited by the king pill stage, Wang Lu's speed at this moment was enough to dazzle the eyes of a deity stage expert. Unfortunately, in the whirlpool of stars, there would not be such a weak existence as a deity stage cultivator. Although Wang Lu's reaction was fast, he still couldn't get rid of the opponent. He only felt that the galaxy in front of him was blurred, and the next moment, he returned to his original place. Wang Lu was silent for a moment, stopped his true yuan, and said, "What's the matter?" With that, his eyes turned to the source of the sound, but he didn't see the purple light. He only saw the petite and exquisite figure of a girl. She looked about 13 or 14 years old, still in her budding age, and her facial features had a clear childishness. However, the frost-like indifference on her face made her look a little more mature. But in any case, she was just a girl with a plain appearance. Not Tetragon? Wang Lu slightly let down his vigilance, but soon he realized that he seemed to be a little naive. "You're the one who led a group of trash to force us into a predicament?" The girl slowly said. "You have some ability." Wang Lu's heart sank slightly. "May I ask who you are?" "I'm Tetragon." Chapter 707. Wang Lu really didn't expect that the situation of king against king would come so quickly. Although he had long expected that he would inevitably have a battle with Tetragon, it shouldn't be now, not alone. Regardless of strength or influence, Tetragon was at the top level. This luxurious feast should be left for the end, not as an appetizer. Frankly speaking, Wang Lu was still completely unprepared to face a madman opponent. It hadn't been long since he learned of the existence of Tetragon. Before Wang Lu had time to lay out a plan, he had already encountered his opponent head-on. This was Tetragon? Most people's first reaction would be shock and disbelief. The Dixian who fought head-on with Qianli Gisaurus and swept the mysterious frost world with the domineering emperor was actually a young girl? Of course, cultivators shouldn't be judged by their appearance. Cultivators with small stature but amazing cultivation were everywhere, but it was rare to see such a huge contrast like Tetragon. As long as a cultivator passed the foundation establishment stage, he could gradually transform his body. After reaching the king pill, the body would often gradually integrate with his cultivation, which was the so-called appearance was born from the heart. For example, If the cultivation method was fierce and unrestrained, his appearance would also be rougher. The overbearing immortal method of tetragon was something that Wang Lu had never seen in his life. It was even more unreasonable than the chaos heaven-splitting sword. Such a person was actually a delicate little girl? In a sense, tetragon was really a pervert. She had such a strong power, and the shape of her body could be changed at will, but she refused to use a little bit of it for plastic surgery, which showed that she should be quite satisfied with her dignity. No, if she was really satisfied with her appearance, why did she always use the Emperor's purple gas to cover her true face? So in general, this was really a self-contradictory, psychopathic person. Wang Lu frowned, and immediately came to an impolite conclusion about the other party in his heart, and then began to think about the next round. The moment he saw tetragon, Wang Lu's mind began to turn frantically. He knew very well that he was by no means the opponent of tetragon. Even if his strength was 10 times stronger, he would not be able to withstand a gentle sweep of Emperor Purple Gas. Although he was a high-level member of the Wanxian League Organizing Committee, and he had a lot of life-saving props, and the elders of the Heavenly Sword Hall of Spirit Sword Mountain had also given him various treasures. However, in front of Dixian, it was doubtful whether these things would work. Therefore, Wang Lu could only rely on himself, his own wisdom. He had to use the clues he had to analyze his opponent, dissect tetragon's behavior pattern, and analyze her every move. Only then could he fight for a chance of survival. However, before Wang Lu could come to a conclusion, tetragon took action. Look at me. After the unquestionable order, a pair of red pupils occupied Wang Lu's vision. Hey, are tetragon's eyes red? Wang Lu was startled, and then his primordial spirit was awed by the red color, and he could no longer think about other things. This was a pair of soul-stealing eyes. Literally, it could hook people's souls out and suppress them. Wang Lu's non-phase immortal heart had already reacted in the first place, trying to suppress the overall situation. However, the gap between King Pill and Dixian was too big, which could not be made up by the characteristics of the method. Is that you? Tetragon's red eyes stared straight into the depths of Wang Lu's heart, and began to try to explore his secret. However, this immortal technique, which was similar to a soul-searching technique, caused a great reaction. Almost in an instant, 3 sword lights lit up in Wang Lu's primordial spirit, and they went straight to tetragon. One was the 9-region sword of mountains and rivers, which was a gift from Hichu Daoren to Wang Lu, a gift for official business. Wang Lu, as the one with the lowest cultivation among the high-level elders of the organizing committee, knew the most secrets, which in itself was a great risk. Therefore, Hichu Daoren hid a sword chi in his primordial spirit. Once someone tried to use the soul-searching technique to forcibly search Wang Lu's memory, this sword chi would explode, and its power would be equivalent to a full blow from Hichu Daoren. The other was the Star Galaxy Sword, which was a protective net set up by Feng Yin Taoist master for Wang Lu. The purpose of this sword chi was not to hurt the enemy, but to open a way for Wang Lu to survive. The third was Wang Wu's non-phase sword chi. Its specific function was unknown, but Wang Wu casually slapped it into Wang Lu's body. Wang Lu also responded casually and did not ask much. With the relationship between the two of them, there was no need to ask much. Wang Wu was one of the few people in the world who would never harm him, so this ambush of non-phase sword chi must have its function. But now, 3 sword chi exploded at the same time, and the power was enough to make any cultivator retreat. Although tetragon had a heaven-defying cultivation, she had consumed a lot of energy in the fierce battle with Gisaurus not long ago. At this time, in the face of 3-peak sword chi, she did not want to take it head-on, so she took a step back. It was this step that created an opportunity for Wang Lu. With the Star Galaxy Sword in the lead, it quickly swept out a smooth path for Wang Lu. Wang Lu immediately flew forward in the direction of the sword chi, and in a flash, she traveled 100 miles. However, the next moment, a familiar red light lit up in front of her. It only took tetragon a moment to catch up. The 9 States Mountain and River Sword, which was used as a distraction, could not entangle her at all, and the non-phase sword chi was completely thrown away. Wang Lu could not criticize her. Even Hichu Daoren could not do it, so he could not ask Wang Wu to do better. Look at me. Behind him, tetragon's voice was unquestionable. Wang Lu could not help but half-turn his body. And at this moment, a woman's voice came in. Okay, I'm looking. With a loose white dress and an emerald green sword, There could not be a second person standing in front of Wang Lu. Wang Wu. Tetragon was taken aback by the sudden appearance of Wang Wu, but then he waved his hand and tried to drive her aside like a fly. In theory, it was easy for the Emperor of Dixian to drive away a king-pilled Taoist master. Tetragon did not want to kill people, so he exerted just the right amount of force, which was exactly what a peak king-pilled Taoist master could not resist, but at the same time, she would not be crushed into powder. But this time, she encountered an obstacle. After that palm strike, Wang Wu was like a spring breeze, and her body remained motionless. At the same time, the emerald green bamboo sword took the initiative and stabbed toward her face. Tetragon's expression became dignified. Looking at the sword light in front of him, he was a bit confused. Outside path. In Dixian's eyes, there was no secret. Wang Wu's king pill cultivation base was without a doubt, but it was also a fact that a Taoist master king pill Taoist master could resist his immortal technique. Combining the two, outside path seemed to be the only explanation. After seeing Wang Wu's identity as an outside path, Tetragon looked at Wang Lu with a much more relaxed expression. You are her disciple. Although you are not an outside path, but in that case it is not you. Wang Lu was confused. Not me. At this time, Wang Lu could already see that Tetragon did not have the intention to kill him, but wanted to understand something from him. It must be something very important, and it was not convenient for too many people to know. Otherwise, Tetragon as a dignified emperor would not ambush a small Taoist master king pill Taoist master. She could totally walk in front of him like she did with Xianmo. So, it was not official business, but private business? But if it was private business, what would it be? Listening to Tetragon's tone, it seemed that she was looking for someone who met the specific requirements. She thought it was her, but after finding out that Wang Wu was an outside path cultivator, she gave up her original plan. What was the outside path hindering her? Was there anything that Tetragon could not do that an outside path cultivator could not do? In a flash, Wang Lu concluded many conditions and puzzles, but the clues at hand could not help him continue to deduce, and his chaotic thoughts always came to an abrupt end. After confirming that Wang Lu did not meet the requirements, Tetragon did not stay any longer, but just nodded and said, after the competition, I will appoint you as my military advisor. Continue to work hard. After saying that, Tetragon's figure disappeared without a trace. Wang Lu watched her go, and the confusion in his heart grew stronger. I say, what is that thing? Pointing in the direction where Tetragon went, Wang Wu was also confused. The innocent girl who was abandoned by you? No, that tone of voice was very condescending, and she even appointed you as her military advisor. Is it the overbearing girl who abandoned you after you slept with her? Wang Lu pursed his lips. Yes, she thinks that I am too pure and not to her taste, so she wants to find some mature and charming type to serve her. I think you are good, you can consider applying. By the way, she is the current leader of the Dixian camp, and has the right to make decisions on everything. Wang Wu's eyes lit up. So, she is also in charge of the Dixian's treasure? Not bad, not bad. Do you have her contact information? Looking at the eyebrows raised high because of her audacity, Wang Lu felt that Tetragon did not seem so difficult to deal with. After returning to the City of Immortals, Wang Lu immediately found Hichu Daoren, and then held an emergency meeting to tell him what he had seen and heard, except for the last part where he was ambushed. Meeting with Xianmo alone was an important mission entrusted to him by the Wanxian League. However, meeting with Tetragon alone was easy to cause unnecessary misunderstanding. Wang Lu only told Hichu Daoren about it and did not announce it at the meeting. The reason why he told Hichu Daoren was because in the short fight with Tetragon, he detonated the 9 regions mountains and rivers sword chi. Hichu Daoren must know something, so it was better to be open and honest. The meeting naturally caused a great shock. The coup in the Dixian camp and the rise of the iron-fisted Emperor Tetragon would bring great pressure to the Wanxian League. The situation that had just improved was likely to disappear. For this reason, the elders at the meeting argued. Some thought that they should step up training and make sufficient preparations. Some thought that training was meaningless. Now they should strike first to gain the upper hand and find a way to bring Tetragon down. Others said that at this time, making a move against the Dixian camp would only give the enemy a handle. The meeting lasted for a long time, but no conclusion was reached. Even Wang Lu remained silent and did not stand on any side. However, this silence itself was also an attitude. Wait and see, and deal with all changes by not changing. His understanding of Tetragon was still too little. What kind of change would she cause after she came to the stage could not be guessed by mere speculation. Therefore, he had to wait for further information in his hand before he could formulate a strategy. And further information would have to wait for a certain person who would not turn back for the sake of wealth and beauty. At the same time, in front of the whirlpool of stars in the Tomb of Immortals, a white-dressed female cultivator was holding a bouquet of brilliant flowers. "Excuse me, is Tetragon here?" After a pause, the woman said, "I'm here to propose." Chapter 708. In the courtyard of Immortal 5 area, Wang Lu warmly welcomed Taoist Master Nanfei's who had returned from a long journey. "Oh, it's been a long time since we last saw each other. It's been almost 6 to 10 hours since we last met. I can't believe that you're really old and strong. Your endurance is amazing. When can I drink your wedding wine?" "Get lost. Can't you see that I'm full of scars and need to recuperate? Hurry up and give me hundreds of thousands of spirit stones to calm me down," Wang Lu exclaimed. "You proposed until you're full of scars and scars? Could it be that there are 50 shadows in Tetragon's heart?" While saying that, Wang Lu also took out the elixirs that the Wanxian League distributed to the high-level elders. Without looking at it, Wang Wu directly grabbed a handful and swallowed it, and then took a long breath. "It's really dangerous," Wang Wu said. Unexpectedly, in a short period of time, the Dixian camp has been managed by her. Next, Wang Wu roughly talked about the experience of the proposal, which was really embarrassing. She proposed at the entrance of the whirlpool of stars with a bouquet of flowers. She thought that even if she provoked Tetragon into a rage, she could at least have a chance to get close to him. Of course, if the two sides fell in love at first sight and Tetragon was obsessed with her infinite amorous feelings, that would be even better. Who knew that before the slogan of marriage was shouted, a group of people came out of the whirlpool of stars and came to punish her on the charge of blaspheming the emperor. Fighting with a group of angry Dixian, being beaten black and blue, fleeing in disarray, and finally returning to the city of immortals with great difficulty. This was the story of Wang Wu's magnificent proposal. Alas, this is really a big loss. Wang Wu complained while operating her true yuan to dissolve the potency. Before this trip, I also went to Yin and Yang school to ask for advice on the secret young girl heart sutra. Ordinary young girls only need a look and a piece of sugar cake to make them dead set on you. I originally thought that after meeting Tetragon, even if I could only display 10% of my divine power, I would at least be able to hold his hand and touch his face. If my luck was good, I might even be able to get intimate with him. Who would have thought that after I shouted twice at the door, such a large group of mad dogs would be alarmed? The fanaticism of this group of fans is really outrageous. Since you're working for the Wanxian League, I won't pursue the matter of the Heart Sutra of young girls. What you want to learn? I can teach you. When I went to the Yin Yang sect this time, I exchanged my telepathic finger with them for a lot of good stuff. This sect that has been passed down for 10,000 years is indeed extraordinary. It's an eye-opener. As Wang Wu spoke, she began to apply the ointment to the wound. At this time, there was only the master and disciple in the courtyard, so she did not avoid it at all. She unbuttoned her shirt, revealing her white jade-like upper body, and began to paint. Wang Lu turned his head to take a look, and his brows furrowed slightly. The so-called black and blue all over the body was written on a piece of paper, but when it fell on a person's body, it was really tragic. To think that she could still forcefully endure and talk cheerfully and wittily with him. Wang Wu was not an ordinary king pill immortal. When it came to the strength of her body and self-healing ability, she had already surpassed most of the cultivators in the world. It was no exaggeration to say that even if her body was smashed to pieces, she could recover in a moment. But from the whirlpool of the Milky Way to the Immortal 5 area, she couldn't recover from her injury all the way. The Dixian people were really ruthless. After a while, Wang Wu treated the wound and became energetic again. Although this operation failed, I think I have no regrets for my true love. The heroic posture of fighting bloody battles has left a deep impression on Tetragon. Especially those men of hers, their faces are abominable, and it will definitely form a sharp contrast in her heart. This will lay a solid foundation for the next success. Wang Lu sighed and said, "Don't worry, you will get the subsidy." "Oh, then I'll go first if there's nothing else." Wang Wu got up and was about to leave. "Wait a minute, what else is there in this operation?" At least give me a detailed report. Wang Wu looked lazy and said, "What else is there to say? Can't you guess it by yourself?" That guy didn't come forward himself, but a group of fanatics jumped out spontaneously. It can only show that she is indeed in complete control of the situation. People like Xian Mo and Bai Zhe have long been swept into the garbage heap of history and are not worth mentioning. Next, let's be ready to face a group of elites with strong wills. The Dixian people with strong wills. Wang Lu's face was a bit dignified, because the next situation was likely to become extremely difficult. In the grand competition, the biggest advantage of the Wanxian League lay in the concentration of resources. The working mechanism of the organizing committee ensured that the resources of the entire 9 regions were concentrated. Opponents like the Master of Heavenly Bookbuilding were also knocked down in the first place and could not set off any storm at all. On the other hand, the Dixian people seemed to be scattered from the beginning. Bai Zhe, who had the highest theoretical position, was an opponent who could only say no. The person who was pushed to the front as the leader was the relatively gentle Xian Mo Black, who really had the ability to lead the overall situation, was willing to stay behind the scenes. Under this mechanism, the power of the Dixian people was very scattered. There was a set of data that was enough to explain the problem. The grand competition had been going on for half a year, and the process of the competition was nearly half. However, among the more than 100 Dixian people, only half of them had actually made a move. There were many kinds of events in the grand competition, and anyone with a specialty could have their own place. Why did that half of the people never contribute? Were they really worthless? If they were worthless, how could they be recruited into the Dixian organization in the first place? In the end, they were still unwilling to contribute, and they had other ideas in mind. Now that Tetragon came to power, his ability to control the situation was beyond expectation. Wang Lu thought that even if such a tyrant could maintain unity on the surface, the opposition in private would not be small. Who knew, from what Wang Wu had seen and heard, things were not like that at all. Where did this guy get such a strong personality charm? Unfortunately, Wang Wu had sacrificed her face and body, but she still failed to get more personal information about Tetragon, which made the future work more difficult. Wang Lu shook his head and decided not to think about it so much for the time being. The situation was difficult, but it was not just him alone. There were also a large group of elders above him. He could not let them have a high salary and let them worry about any problems first. However, before Wang Lu could hold another emergency meeting, an unexpected situation disrupted all his calculations. Knock, knock, knock. There was a knock on the door in the courtyard of the Immortal 5 area. Wang Lu, who was writing the meeting materials, raised his head and motioned to Hai Yunfan next to him to open the door. At the same time, he was curious in his heart. Who would come to the door at this time? If it was Hichu Daoren and other Wanxian League elders, they would most likely inform in advance before visiting so that they could prepare. But people like Wang Wu, who was familiar with the place, would directly fly into the courtyard on her sword. The array arranged on the outer wall was equivalent to non-existent to her. However, Wang Lu's curiosity only existed for a moment, and he soon focused on the document in front of him. The threat posed by Tetragon was too strong. No matter what the elders above thought or did, he, as the chief planner, must do the best he could. However, he had just been immersed in it for a while when a series of slightly hurried footsteps from Hai Yunfan sounded outside the house, disrupting Wang Lu's thoughts. With Hai Yunfan's temperament and his current position, there were not many situations that could make him panic. Before, when Hichu Daoren visited by chance, Hai Yunfan also received him generously. What kind of person was outside the door now? Was it an ex-lover who came to collect debts with an illegitimate child? Halfway through his thoughts, Hai Yunfan had already walked into the house. Tetragon is here. What the heck? Wang Lu was also shocked at this time. The brush in his hand fell on the table with a clatter, rolling and leaving an ink mark. Hai Yunfan handed a beautiful letter to Wang Lu. This is a visitation card, presented by Luo Xueqi on behalf of Tetragon. Hearing this, Wang Lu felt a little relieved. Tetragon regarded himself as an emperor, and sure enough, he would not omit the necessary procedures. When an emperor went out, it was necessary to clear the way in front of others, and he would not go on a trip at will. So today, it was not Tetragon who came, but Tetragon who wanted to come. The person who really came was her messenger. After taking the letter, Wang Lu opened it and asked, "The dignified Luo Xueqi has fallen to be a messenger for others. It's really rare." What the heck? It was written in the letter that Tetragon would come to visit in a quarter of an hour. Wasn't this guy too swift and decisive? Did he have to be so anxious? In fact, Tetragon was more anxious than he thought. When Wang Lu put down the letter, Tetragon had already pushed the door open and came in. The tactical array attached to the door, which was enough to stop a Supreme, did not exist under her hands. This time, Tetragon did not show her true face. Instead, the Emperor's purple chi lingered around her body, which floated in like a purple ball of light, which looked particularly strange. However, what was even more strange was her motive. What was she going to do? Since the start of the grand competition, there had never been a precedent of Dixian actively entering other areas of the City of Immortals to visit the cultivators of 9 regions. They had always lived in the whirlpool of stars or in the designated area of the City of Immortals, and would not leave easily. Even Xian Mo, who had a good relationship with Wang Lu and the others, had never broken this convention. Wang Lu got up to greet Tetragon and winked at Hai Yun Fan, indicating him to report the matter to Hichu Daorin as soon as possible. Hai Yun Fan understood and withdrew from the back door. Tetragon obviously saw it, but she did not stop him. She came to find Wang Lu. In her eyes, other people were like ants. She didn't care what they thought or what they would do. Seeing Wang Lu, Tetragon went straight to the point. To end the grand competition. Wang Lu was silent for a moment. Why? Tetragon said, because its existence is meaningless. Both of us have wasted too much time and resources. It's time to end it. Wang Lu was silent for a while and then said, the grand competition does waste a lot of time and resources, but it exists to solve contradictions and avoid greater waste. And now, the contradiction still exists. Tetragon said, yes, so before the end of the competition, I will solve this contradiction first. Wang Lu looked at the purple ball of light in front of him in surprise. Was she serious? The purpose of the grand competition was to deal with the relationship between the Wanxian League and Dixian, to determine the distribution of inheritance and position by the result of the competition. At the same time, it was to promote the understanding of both sides in the process of the competition and reach more consensus. Unfortunately, the latter purpose did not seem to be well achieved. The two sides still could not understand each other and communicate with each other. The estrangement of 16,000 years was not an easy task to eliminate. So, Tetragon had a way to solve this problem? It's very simple. Let the two sides unite and everyone will obey my orders. I can guarantee to treat every camp and everyone impartially. Wang Lu looked at Tetragon in silence, deeply impressed by her whimsical imagination. Should he say that she was indeed Tetragon? Her method of dealing with problems was simple and crude to the extreme. Everyone should obey her orders? She really dared to think and dared to say it. This is the simplest and wisest way. Tetragon said coldly, I have the strength better than everyone, so I should be in charge of everything. I will give you a month. During this period, I will be in the arena in Immortal 1 area. I welcome any of you to challenge me in any situation. Wang Lu sighed and said, it's not just a matter of strength. Even if you are really invincible in the world, Tetragon interrupted, you are worried that my position is biased towards the Dixian side, and my actions and judgments are not good for you. This problem can also be solved. Wang Lu opened his mouth but did not speak. Tetragon was right. The focus of the problem now could be summed up in 2 points. First, no one thought that the other side was stronger than themselves. Dixian was superior in terms of individual strength, but the resources of the Wanxian League were much richer. Second, no one trusted the other side and thought that the other side was likely to do something bad to them after they came to power. If Tetragon could really solve these 2 problems at the same time, she was indeed qualified to be the leader. However, how could these 2 problems be so easy to solve? The first one was fine. If she could really keep winning in the arena for a month without losing, then no one could say anything wrong. The difficulty lay in the second problem. How could she win the trust of the Wanxian League? With her charisma as a leader? That would be ridiculous. Not to mention the Wanxian League, she did not win the support of everyone in Dixian. At least, Xian Mo, Bai Zhe and others were firm opponents. But the next moment, Tetragon solved the problem with only 1 sentence. I can unite with you by marriage. Unite by marriage? Wang Lu resisted the dryness in his throat and asked, who do you want to unite by marriage? Thinking that she came all the way to find him, Could it be to be honest, from the position of the sect's lead representative to where he was today, Wang Lu did consider that when necessary, he would sacrifice his personal interest for the sake of politics. In the previous meeting, when a group of elders asked him to sacrifice his body to take down Xian Mo, Wang Lu also thought about it a little. However, deep in his heart, he was extremely resistant to it. Moreover, if it was Xian Mo who was gentle and elegant, he had seen Tetragon's real body. Wang Lu had no feelings for young girls. Just when Wang Lu was struggling, Tetragon smiled and said, "Not long ago, someone from your side proposed to me." After a pause she said, "I appreciated her courage and straightforwardness, so I decided to marry her as my wife." Chapter 709. Tetragon is really a master who is good at disrupting other people's rhythm. Since her bizarre resuscitation, Wang Lu found that her rhythm could never be found again. In the beginning, Wang Lu planned to get closer to Dixian through Xian Mo. As a result, just when she was about to act, Tetragon launched a coup and drove Xian Mo and others out of power. The original work plan was all scrapped. The second time was when Wang Lu went to the mysterious Frost World alone and witnessed a fierce battle between Tetragon and Gisaurus. She planned to leave quickly while Tetragon recovered his strength, but she was blocked by her opponent at the exit. From that time on, Wang Lu judged that Tetragon's ability to control the rhythm was absolutely top-notch. She was very good at judging the opponent's movements, as if she could predict the future. She could add a little strength at the key points, and she could defeat a great force with little effort. Not to mention that with her strength it was a standard great force. The third time was when Wang Wu proposed with a bouquet of flowers. She originally had the intention of disrupting the other party's rhythm, but a group of fanatical believers easily destroyed her plan. Wang Lu didn't think that it was deliberately instigated by Tetragon, but she also didn't think that she didn't know about it. A mature emperor must know how to manipulate people's hearts, and it was a necessary skill to let the cannon fodder be the scapegoat. And Tetragon's understatement really showed her skill. The fourth time was this counter-proposal, which was really unexpected and unconventional, which made people slap the table and applaud. The counter-proposal seemed absurd and unruly, as if it was revenge for Wang Wu holding flowers before. But how could Tetragon, as an emperor, make such a boring joke? She was seriously considering taking Wang Wu as her beloved concubine, as a political marriage to win over the cultivators of the Wanxian League. And it was because of Tetragon's seriousness that Wang Lu would sigh that this guy was really a top master of disrupting the rhythm. Because her method was feasible, very feasible. Fighting against the union of 10,000 immortals alone in the arena of Immortal One area, if she could really win without losing, her reputation would be like the sun in the sky. And with Wang Wu's marriage, if she was really willing to become a Taoist companion with Wang Wu, it could indeed quell the doubts in many people's hearts. Wang Lu would do the same thing if she were in her place. No matter how it was calculated, the framework of the grand competition was not good for Dixian. Senior Gem Emperor's ability to integrate the Earth Immortal camp would certainly allow the Earth Immortals to exert more energy. However, after the loss of Xian Mo and the others, her lineup was already very thin. In the face of a comprehensive competition like the grand competition, it was inevitable that she would be stretched. And Wang Lu also did a good job on this point. He planned a number of tactics to use the numerical advantage of the union of 10,000 immortals to compete with the opponent in the arena. On the whole, the grand competition was beneficial to the Wanxian League and disadvantageous to Dixian. The Dixian were willing to recognize this competition because Bai Zhe lost to Wang Wu in a gambling fight, and he represented the Dixian camp at that time. After that, the two sides jointly signed a contract, and more than 100 Dixian put their immortal spirit on the 9 regions map, and there was no room for regret. However, at that time, Tetragon had not yet resuscitation and had not placed her immortal spirit. Therefore, she was not limited by the contract and had the qualification to overturn the grand competition. If it were Wang Lu himself, he would also make full use of this. It was just that he might not be able to do it as decisively as Tetragon. Her actions were too fast. From the perspective of a bystander, Wang Lu appreciated Tetragon's means and execution. However, as an opponent now, Wang Lu began to miss Bai Zhe and Black. After taking a deep breath, Wang Lu began to face his opponent. The first step was to avoid the sharp edge. Tetragon's style of doing things was extremely overbearing, which could be seen from how she treated Bai Zhe and Xian Mo after her resuscitation. She could unite a large number of Dixian and make them her loyal supporters, but she could be ruthless toward Bai Zhe and the others, which showed how radical her style of doing things was. Now, she was persuading him with kind words, but the unquestionable tone of her speech was almost undisguised. Of course, Wang Lu would not agree to cancel the grand competition, let alone agree to marry Wang Wu as his beloved concubine. However, direct refusal was obviously not a good way. Therefore, Wang Lu used the politician's solution to the problem. Push. Whether it's ending the grand competition or marrying Wang Wu to you, it's not up to me. I'm just the chief planner, not the person in charge. Tetragon sneered and pressed him step by step. But I only ask about your attitude. Wang Lu was silent for a moment, not knowing how to answer. At the same time, he knew that if he was led by Tetragon like this, he would never be able to get back his rhythm. So, what should he do? In fact, there was only one answer. Tetragon is a master of rhythm control, but am I not? When it comes to rhythm control, has Wang Lu ever been afraid of anyone? Creating a miracle from a deadlock was his forte. In an instant, Wang Lu had sorted out his thoughts in his mind, and then he shrugged. Then forgive me for being blunt, I object. Tetragon was not surprised. Reason. Wang Lu opened his mouth. After a moment of deliberation, he said seriously, Wang Wu is my wife. A famous flower already belongs to someone. Of course, a woman can't marry more than one person. The purple ball of light in front of Wang Lu was quiet for a moment. Tetragon asked, since she is your wife, why did she propose to me some time ago? Wang Lu said, because she is a bitch with no integrity and no lower limit. Tetragon was once again disrupted by this bold and unconstrained line. In the purple ball of light, the young girl Tetragon seriously examined Wang Lu. The Dixian's gaze easily saw through all the disguises of the other party, looking straight into the depths of his soul. Then she found that Wang Lu was not lying. At least when he said this, it was from the bottom of his heart. What is this situation? Tetragon looked at him again and again in disbelief. A bitch with no integrity and no lower limit? Even if it was a joke, it was too much to say such insulting words. Besides, if Wang Wu was really so unbearable, why would he marry her? No. This condition itself was problematic. They were master and apprentice. How could they marry each other? It was true that the seniority and ethics of cultivators were very different from the situation in the mortal world, but the situation of this master and apprentice was too special. Tetragon's heart was filled with countless surprises, but she quickly suppressed them. Spending too much time on these issues was falling into the other party's rhythm. It didn't matter what the relationship between Wang Lu and his master was. If Wang Wu couldn't be the marriage partner, then she would find another one. Tetragon said, since Wang Wu can't be my wife, then you can be my concubine. Wang Lu was surprised. Me? You may not understand just now. Wang Wu is my wife, so in turn, I am her husband. I also have a master, so I can't marry more than one person. Unless you want two women to serve one husband as a dignified emperor. But I've been sickly since I was a child, and my kidneys are thin. I can barely serve half a night. I'm afraid I can't serve two people. Listening to his nonsense, Tetragon laughed and said, the marriage can be dissolved. Since you also think that Wang Wu is a bitch without integrity, it's better to divorce her as soon as possible. As for your physique, I think you are thinking too much. This is a political marriage. There is no need for our personal relationship to be too intimate. It has nothing to do with me. Wang Lu was amazed. She wanted to marry someone but didn't want anyone to touch her. It seemed that she also had a pair of arms. In that case, why don't you find Hichu Daoren? He is the real #1 person in our Wanxian League. He has been cultivating for nearly 1,000 years without getting married. His character is simple and upright, and he is most suitable to be the butler of a domineering emperor like you. Although his appearance now looks a bit vicissitudes, you don't care anyway. Wang Lu pushed out the old man Hichu, which was deliberately disgusting. However, when Tetragon heard this, he said, okay, then Hichu Daoren. What? Tetragon said, since you proposed Hichu Daoren, then I will marry him. According to what I said before, after the grand competition, I will be responsible for accepting challenges in Immortal 1 area for a month. If I can win all the challenges without losing, you will surrender to me according to the agreement. At the same time, I will marry Hichu Daoren after the competition. That's it. Wait a minute, according to normal logic, you should firmly oppose the marriage with Hichu Daoren. That dry old man, you. Unfortunately, Tetragon no longer paid any attention to what Wang Lu said. The purple ball of light flickered and then disappeared without a trace, which made Wang Lu's voice stop abruptly. Damn it, what's going on? The brief confrontation with Tetragon ended with Wang Lu's defeat. This kind of verbal defeat was rare for Wang Lu. However, in retrospect, Wang Lu was really convinced. Tetragon's lower limit was really unfathomable. Even a dry old man like Hichu Daoren didn't despise him. As a dignified emperor, he was willing to lower himself to this extent. What else could Wang Lu say? Of course, the lower limit was just a joke. From another perspective, Tetragon was just showing his own awareness. The awareness of establishing an alliance. With her intelligence, didn't she know how much harm this marriage would do to herself? For the sake of marriage, she didn't even pick her partner. This was just like a prostitute. However, Tetragon was still willing to do it. Because she wanted to end the farce as soon as possible, establish a real alliance, and face the threat of the fallen immortal together. This had nothing to do with self-interest. For self-interest, she had too many means to use. It was also after realizing this that Wang Lu gave up the plan to continue to entangle with Tetragon. The other party had already done this, so the Wanxian League couldn't be too stingy, right? In a sense, Tetragon was far more difficult to deal with than by Zhe, Shen Mo, and others. However, after a conversation with Tetragon, Wang Lu felt that it seemed good to have such a guy wake up. Thinking of this, Wang Lu sighed and put down the pen in his hand. Next, how should I report to Hichu Daoren? Boss Hichu, congratulations. I just successfully sold you out and found you a young girl to be your wife. Please enjoy, no need to be polite. Chapter 710. Marriage. In Shangjing's sex encampment in Immortal 4 area, Hichu Daoren stared at the document presented by Wang Lu in astonishment and blurted out. With Daoist Hitu's vision and temperament, there were not many things in this world that could shock him. However, at this time, he was so shocked by the appalling title on the document in front of him that he opened his mouth wide. The teacup in his hand shook uncontrollably, spilling clear tea. Hichu Daoren's reaction also shocked the people around him. The two young Daoist children with delicate features widened their eyes in surprise. They had been serving Hichu Daoren for more than 100 years, and such a situation was really rare. They were very curious about what kind of document could make their supreme lose his composure like this. However, at this time, they suppressed the curiosity in their hearts and ignored it. Because their duty was to listen to Hichu Daoren's orders, not to inquire about the news that they shouldn't inquire about. In fact, although Hichu Daoren's character was simple and rigid, he was not a very harsh sect leader. In front of him, occasionally overstepping his boundaries, he would not care. However, at this time, in addition to Hichu and the two Daoist children, there was also a strict big sister of the sect. Qianghua. Master, please pay attention to your manners. The girl with a flawless face frowned slightly and mercilessly pointed out Hichu Daoren's improper behavior. However, in Hichu's apology, she turned her eyes to the document in his hand. As the lead disciple of Shangjing's sect, she had the same authority as a senior elder. She was qualified to read the document in Hichu's hand directly. As her eyes swept through the document, Qianghua gently read out the title. Request for instructions on the marriage between Supreme Hichu and the leader of the Dixian, Tetragon? When she read the last few words, Qianghua's tone could not help but rise, because the matter was too incredible. Even if it was just such a title, it made people want to immediately rush to the Immortal 5 area, drag out Wang Lu, and ask him what kind of trick he was playing. After Qianghua read out the title, the two Taoist children standing at the side of the house tacitly left. There were some words that they shouldn't have heard. Even if they were to poke their ears, they still shouldn't listen. A moment later, Qianghua raised her head and said, Master, please allow me to read this document with you. He too nodded. Not long after, the two of them finished reading the document and fell into deep thought at the same time. Although the title could be described as horrifying and absurd, Wang Lu's statement of facts in this document was rigorous and serious. He wrote down all the things that happened during his meeting with Senior Gem Emperor in this request for instructions, and then put forward his own suggestions. Tetragon intended to suspend the grand competition, and proposed an alternative that was difficult to oppose. In order to show her sincerity, She was willing to have a political marriage with the Wanxian League, and the most representative figure of the Wanxian League was Hichu Daoren, the #1 person in 9 regions. As it happened, Hichu Daoren had never been married, so he and Tetragon were simply a match made in heaven. Although Tetragon is a woman, her character is more upright than that of a man. She does things cleanly and neatly, and she means what she says, which is in line with Supreme He2's style of doing things. In addition, although she is an ancient figure, her appearance is like that of a young girl. Her face is delicate and dignified, and her figure is young but slightly graceful. To sum up, it is recommended that Supreme He2 agree to the other party's marriage request and become Taoist companions with Tetragon. Is it okay? After reading the whole report, Hichu Daoren was silent. Qianghua sighed softly and said, "The change of things is really unexpected. Unexpectedly, there is a character like Tetragon on the side of Dixian. Unfortunately. Master, how should we reply to Wang Lu?" Hichu Daoren pondered and said, "Call him first." After being summoned by He2, Wang Lu appeared in front of him a moment later. "Greetings, Supreme He Tuesday." After a casual salute, Wang Lu asked with a smile, "Supreme must have read my request. What do you think? Is Tetragon's peerless girl in line with your taste? Or do you prefer a little more mature?" Qianghua shouted, "Don't talk nonsense." Hichu Daoren didn't mind Wang Lu's teasing and said, "The reason I called you here is indeed about Tetragon. This person suddenly rose from his sleep and surprised us with a single brilliant feat. However, you mentioned in your report that after meeting you, she proposed to end the grand competition. As an alternative, on the one hand, she will fight the Wanxian League alone in the arena for a month. On the other hand, she is ready to marry a member of the Wanxian League. Your report directly asks for the marriage. Does it mean that you have agreed to end the grand competition?" Wang Lu's countenance turned serious. "Supreme is right. In my opinion, the grand competition can indeed end." Qianghua asked in a deep voice, "In this grand competition, we have worked hard to gradually reverse the situation from a desperate situation. Now we are in an advantageous position. Why should we give up halfway because of the other party's words? Do you think she is so powerful that it is irresistible, or do you think her proposal will be more beneficial to us?" Wang Lu said, "Actually, it has nothing to do with Tetragon's alternative plan. I agree with her plan. The most important thing is that there is no value in continuing the grand competition." After a pause, Wang Lu explained, "My original intention in designing the grand competition was not just to win the competition. I hope that through this competition, I can promote the internal exchange of the Wanxian League, and at the same time, narrow the distance between the Wanxian League and the Dixian League. In this way, no matter who wins or loses in the future, at least we can unite as a whole as possible. Only in this way can we hope to compete against more powerful opponents." However, the grand competition has continued to this day, and the effect is not ideal. Not only has the distance with the Dixian League not been narrowed, but it has also brewed hatred because of the killing between them. At the same time, the Wanxian League has barely shown cohesion under high pressure, and the internal contradictions have not decreased but increased. From this point of view, I have failed in my duty as the chief planner." After listening to Wang Lu's words, Hichu Daoren was silent for a long time. "This is not your fault." Before he could finish his words, he saw Wang Lu nod and say, "Supreme is wise, this is indeed not my fault." Hichu Daoren suddenly felt as if he was choked and could not speak for a long time. Wang Lu explained, "At the beginning of the grand competition, the Dixian League has already made a storm of blood. Even if I have thousands of means, I can't do anything about it. Cooperation requires a tacit understanding between the two sides. If they don't cooperate, our unilateral force will only cause friction and bleeding. Later I plan to retaliate and kill people, which was already the last resort. If I can't maintain unity with the Dixian League, I should at least unite with my own people and not let my own people lose confidence. However, looking back on our original intention, the grand competition is really tantamount to chicken ribs. The hands of both sides are stained with each other's blood. Even if we win the competition in the end, what's the point of Dixian League not being convinced? To what extent can a single contract restrain the Dixian League?" Taoist He2 let out a sigh and remained silent. As a matter of fact, the high-level elders had long been aware of the situation that Wang Lu said. From the beginning of the competition, when the Dixian League made a ruthless move, they realized that this grand competition was doomed to be unable to end well. In the competition, Hichu Daoren vigorously delegated power to Wang Lu, who was still inexperienced and had shallow cultivation base, to control the overall situation. This was more or less the reason. If something was doomed to fail, then let Wang Lu toss it around. Maybe there could be a miracle? Of course, it's not that there is no room for maneuver. My previous consideration was to pull one side and fight another side. On the one hand, I would use Shen Mo as a channel to gradually establish friendship with the more moderate Dixian League. On the other hand, I would cut off the ruthless people like Xueqi Tu and Little Poison Immortal. Although the implementation will be very troublesome and the effect may not be good, it's the only way. Wang Lu said in a deep voice, but now the situation has changed. Shen Mo and the others have been exiled by Tetragon. We have lost the channel to establish personal friendship with Dixian League. The original plan is no longer feasible. The value of the grand competition has been further reduced. However, the appearance of Tetragon has given me a turning point. According to the original plan, because the Dixian League is like scattered sand, we should try our best to make friends with everyone in the Dixian League. But now that Tetragon has unified the League, we only need to make friends with her alone. As for how to unite the Dixian League, that is the task of Tetragon. Originally, we needed to defeat more than 100 Dixian League members in thousands of intricate events. During this period, we need to consume a lot of resources, which has also led to a lot of internal contradictions. But now, we only need to focus on Tetragon alone. In 1 month we can compete with her in any event, and in thousands of events as long as we can win one. Hearing this, he too interrupted. If she dares to make such a condition, she must have something to rely on. According to what you said in your report, Tetragon's strength and calculation are unprecedentedly powerful, almost omniscient and omnipotent. So, how can you guarantee that we can absolutely win a match in 1 month? Wang Lu said, it doesn't matter if we can't win. If Tetragon is really strong enough to sweep the Wanxian League, what else can we do but accept the loss? It would be too ugly to admit defeat. Moreover, the marriage proposed by Tetragon is precisely prepared for this situation. We can't overwhelm her on the battlefield, so we can only hope that the person who marries her can do her duty. Speaking of this, Wang Lu turned his eyes to the document in He Tu's hand. Supreme He Tu, you are the well-deserved #1 person in the Wanxian League. You are extremely strong and highly respected. No one can shoulder this heavy responsibility except you. Speaking of this, even Qianghua felt speechless. And Hichu Daoren pondered for a long time. His expression changed 3 times. Finally, after thinking for a long time, Hichu Daoren gave his answer. This matter. I'm afraid I can only say sorry. Wang Lu was surprised. Why? Because I practiced the virgin skill. Chapter 7:11. In Hichu Daoren's tower, the long silence made the atmosphere somewhat austere. In the huge room, there were only He Tu, Qianghua, and Wang Lu, 3 people. All of them were expressionless, as if they were petrified. When the river of time flowed, it seemed to bypass these 3 people, making them independent of the time and space. After no one knows how much time has passed, Wang Lu coughed and broke the silence. I'm sorry. Could I trouble you to repeat it again? I think I heard it wrong just now. Hichu Daoren very seriously repeated. I practiced the virgin skill. Wang Lu tightly pursed his lips and stared at the old man in front of him. After a long time, he somewhat tremblingly asked, Virgin skill. Don't you think it's a waste? Hichu Daoren blinked his eyes. What waste? Wang Lu said, the body, hair, and skin are given by your parents. Don't you think it's a pity to abandon such a big device? Hichu Daoren said, I've been using it, how could I abandon it? If it doesn't provide the innate yang energy, how could I practice the virgin skill? Wang Lu was right, the virgin skill was not castration, there was indeed a difference between the two. However, he still felt that it was a waste. The dignified sect leader of Shangjing sect, the leader of the hundreds of millions of cultivators in 9 regions, the peerless master that countless girls didn't even dare to dream of, actually practiced the virgin skill. No wonder Shizhou was always indifferent to Shangjing sect, especially to Hichu Daoren. This was simply a reckless waste of God's good gift. However, Wang Lu only thought about it in his heart. There were countless cultivators in 9 regions who practiced the virgin skill, and Hichu Daoren was not a maverick. It seemed that the sect leader of Lingjian school didn't make full use of his device. Wang Lu was unhappy because if Hichu Daoren cultivated the virgin technique, it would be much more troublesome to persuade him to marry Tetragon. It's like this. Tetragon said that the marriage is just a facade. She won't have sex with anyone, so you don't have to worry that the marriage will break your virginity. You can rest assured and marry her. Qianghua looked angry and scolded. Wang Lu, what do you think a supreme is? Wang Lu sincerely said, of course, he is the role model of 9 regions, the leader of hundreds of millions of cultivators, the well-deserved first in this world. Therefore, only Hichu Daoren is qualified to marry Tetragon. If it were anyone else, it would be absolutely impossible. Supreme has always been broad-minded about the 9 regions, so presumably, you can't bear to hinder the alliance with the Dixian because of your own selfishness, which is a major event related to the rise and fall of the 9 regions. Upon hearing this, Hichu too was stunned. That seems to be, Qianghua angrily interrupted Hichu Daoren and angrily said to Wang Lu, a gentleman can be deceived by his own means, but you're not polite at all. What you said is high-sounding, but I think you're just trying to divert the trouble to someone else. Since Tetragon wants to marry, why didn't she look for my master directly, but you first? Doesn't she know who the current leader of the Wanxian League is? She looked for you first, which can only mean that in her opinion, you are more suitable. Wang Lu inwardly said, she is indeed worthy to be the lead disciple of Shangjing's sect. Her deduction is really wonderful. Although the conclusion is not right, it's not far from it. Although the first person Tetragon likes is not me, it's my master. Unfortunately, I can't give in on this issue no matter what. Today, even if I have to talk until my saliva is dry, I must bluff the old Taoist Hichu into marrying Tetragon. As a result, before he could open his mouth to show his skill, he heard Hichu say, the matter of marriage is of great importance, so it must be carefully considered again and again. Moreover, the premise of the marriage is to end the grand competition first. Although I have no objection to this matter, it will be very difficult to carry it out. Wang Lu sighed with emotion. Old ginger is indeed spicier. In just a few words, he has already changed the topic. Among the older generation of cultivators, Hichu Daoren's character was relatively simple and vigorous. Qianghua said that a gentleman could be deceived by his own means, but the premise was that Hichu Daoren had the character of a gentleman. As a result, this old gentleman also resolutely began to play tricks in the face of marriage, sacrificing his character to hold his virginity. The resistance to the marriage was not small, so he had to put more effort into it. As for the resistance to end the grand competition, he had already expected it. From the preparation to the implementation of the grand competition, almost all the forces of the immortal cultivation world in 9 regions had been mobilized, and even international friends from the Western continent had come to help. Such a grand event was like a war chariot that was extremely heavy, rolling forward with unstoppable momentum. Even the driver of the chariot could only slightly adjust the direction of the chariot, and it was absolutely impossible for it to stop abruptly. Especially recently, with the efforts of Wang Lu, the Wanxian League finally reversed its decline and began to stride towards victory. If the organizing committee suddenly claimed that the grand competition had lost its meaning and asked everyone to go back to their own homes, perhaps the instant anger would be enough to make the Wanxian League collapse. Therefore, even if the grand competition was to end, it must be done slowly and steadily. Today, he found Hichu Daoren, which was also a high-level communication. If it were to be carried out, he didn't know how many meetings and discussions would be held. However, if the action is too slow, Tetragon may not be willing to wait. In my observation, Tetragon is a person who either doesn't do it or does it swiftly and decisively. In many cases, he doesn't even care if the people around him can keep up. Therefore, the end of the grand competition can't be done according to the normal process. Then what are you going to do? Hichu Daoren saw that Wang Lu looked calm when he spoke. Obviously, he already had a plan, so he directly asked. Wang Lu said, there's no need to tell everyone the truth. Just say that the Dixian side requests to change the form of the competition and still regard it as a kind of grand competition. In fact, Tetragon's fight against the Wanxian League alone does have something in common with the grand competition to some extent. Qianghua Fairy pondered for a moment and said, but the specific organizational form of the grand competition was finally determined and accepted after many discussions. A reason is always needed for a sudden change. In particular, This matter was proposed by the Dixian side, so the resistance is even greater. Wang Lu said, so we need a story that can convince everyone. Qianghua said, I'd like to hear the details. I've tried to imagine it. It can be roughly said that the purpose of the grand competition is to strengthen communication and enhance friendship in the competition. However, after the start of the competition, a few Dixian people, led by Zhe and Black, ignored the overall situation, stirred up trouble, stirred up a bloody storm, and brewed a deep hatred between the Wanxian League and Dixian, destroying the good situation of unity and friendship. Tetragon was once a highly respected predecessor and leader of Dixian. Because of his heavy injury, he fell into eternal sleep. After this unexpected resuscitation, he soon understood what happened and felt angry and ashamed of the behavior of Bai Zhe and the others. Thus, he set things right and exiled the former regime. Then, because of the mistakes made by Dixian's companions, he felt deeply guilty and decided to atone in his own way, which was to take all the competitions alone. After a series of stories were told, Wang Lu looked up at Hichu and Qianghua and said, what do you think of this story? Is it very convincing? Hichu Daoren pondered and said, is this pushing the responsibility to those exiled Dixian people? Isn't this a bit? Black deserves it, but Xian Mo is innocent. Wang Lu said, there's no other way. Compared with Tetragon on the stage, Xian Mo has no value. This is the use of waste. Tetragon has a deep hatred for those people. As long as she is still on the stage, Bai Zhe, Xian Mo, and the others can't come back. Hichu Daoren was silent for a while and no longer spoke, reluctantly acquiescing. Qianghua closed her eyes and sighed. This is just your opinion. What if Tetragon refuses to cooperate with you to tell this story? I think if Tetragon is as proud and arrogant as you said, he should disdain telling such a lie. Wang Lu said, so this goes back to the original problem. Please marry her quickly and use pillow talk to make her give up her principles. Let me think about it. Hichu frowned and seemed to be vaguely tempted. Wang Lu knew that haste makes waste. It was very difficult to fool Hichu in one breath, especially when there was Qianghua next to him, whose intelligence was no less than his. Today, it was already a success to make Hichu Daoren say, let me think twice. Thereupon, Wang Lu didn't waste any time and directly bid farewell to He. Tuesday. Qianghua stood up to send him off. When Wang Lu was sent out of the tower, the girl's cold voice entered Wang Lu's ears. Now that you are in a whirlpool, don't lose your way. Upon hearing this, Wang Lu was startled and then smiled. Don't worry. From the Tower of Shangjing sect all the way back to the Immortal 5 area, Wang Lu felt a lot more relaxed and smiled all the way. However, when he arrived at the door, the smile froze on his face. A budding young girl with an immature face was leaning in front of the window sill, observing the decoration of the courtyard with great interest. Seeing Wang Lu, the corner of her mouth slightly hooked up, as if she was greeting him with a smile. Wang Lu was inwardly startled. You are the dignified king of Dixian. Instead of showing off your strength in your own home, what are you doing here? And in such a dignified manner? When Tetragon was surrounded by the purple aura of the Emperor, like a ball of light, it meant that she was playing the role of the Emperor. And when she showed her real body, it meant that she had to deal with private affairs. But the problem was, her marriage partner had been set to Taoist master He too, so why did she look for Wang Lu to deal with her private affairs? Take me out for a walk. Tetragon always went straight to the point. Upon hearing this, Wang Lu was startled. Go out? You mean? Tetragon said, after more than 10,000 years of sleep, I want to see what the 9 regions looks like now. Wang Lu smiled bitterly. It's probably not good to see. It's not that it's not good to see, but it's not convenient to see. The king of Dixian suddenly walked out of the group of immortal tombs and set foot in 9 regions. The meaning of this was enough to cause countless shocks. Tetragon completely ignored it. She stepped forward and pulled Wang Lu's hand. Let's go, take me to see your sect first. Wang Lu earnestly said, you previously promised to marry Master He too, and now you are already a bride-to-be. How can you be entangled with a strange man like me? Tetragon looked at him and said, in that case, I can also change the marriage partner to you. Wang Lu immediately changed his mind. The Lingjian School is located on Spirit Sword Mountain in Blue River region. The scenery is beautiful, the birds are singing, and the flowers are fragrant. I will take you to see it. Chapter 7:12. Oh, this is the Blue River region? Tetragon stood on the purple cloud and frowned slightly. Wang Lu explained from the side, among the 9 regions, the Blue River region is located on the border. The population is not very dense, the resources are not very rich, and the surrounding spiritual energy is not very abundant. Moreover, this place used to be the battlefield of the Great War of Immortals and Demons, so you can't see the flourishing of flowers. But then again, in the view of ancient people like you, compared with the prosperous day of the Immortal Path, I'm afraid 9 regions is in ruins everywhere. Tetragon shook her head in silence and then looked down at the ground under her feet. The girl's eyes were as deep as the unfathomable sea. Her eyes pierced through the layers of clouds and took a panoramic view of the common people. Wang Lu stood beside Tetragon on his flying sword, but his eyes didn't look down. Instead, he stared at the girl's eyes, looking at the sky and earth reflected in her deep eyes. In a trance, Wang Lu seemed to have a slight sense of empathy with Tetragon and obtained the perspective of the Dixian king. In her eyes, the hundreds of millions of creatures in the Blue River region were like ants, and the rich spiritual veins were like thin snakes within her reach. The vast land, the mountains and rivers were all under her control. Even the obviously elusive karma and timeline showed some clues. After a long time, Tetragon withdrew her gaze and let out a sigh of emotion. This is the Blue River region. Wang Lu suddenly realized that Tetragon actually didn't care about the decline of the Immortal Path after the Age of Chaos, nor did she care about whether the 9 regions was in ruins or prosperous. She just sighed with emotion that after her 16,000 years of sleep, the world had changed into mulberry fields. The former Blue River region must not be like this. At that time, there was no Spirit Sword Mountain, no Lingzhen School, and no Great Ming Country's host palace. However, there was also the immortal cultivation world, and there were many cultivators who cultivated and lived there. And that was the Blue River region that Tetragon was familiar with. However, Tetragon didn't waste time on unnecessary sentimentality. The girl stopped in the air for a moment and then reached out to the west. The next moment, the layers of clouds opened, revealing a lonely and proud mountain shadow in the distant sky, like a sharp sword piercing the sky. Spirit Sword Mountain? Wang Lu nodded. The place that Tetragon pointed out was the place where the Feng Shui line in the Blue River region gathered the densest spiritual energy. There was no other choice other than Spirit Sword Mountain. Let's go. Take me there. She said that she wanted Wang Lu to take her with him, but as soon as Tetragon's voice fell, he forcibly pulled Wang Lu's hand. The two of them flashed and crossed thousands of rivers and mountains. From the border of Blue River region near Cloud region, they came to the foot of Spirit Sword Mountain. Dixin's movement technique was indeed impressive. After landing, Tetragon was a little curious. There's a town here? Wang Lu said, Lingxi Town is the intersection point between Lingzhen School and the mortal world. Tetragon interrupted, why do we have to interact with the mortal world? Isn't Lingzhen School one of the 5 super sects? Wang Lu thought for a moment. According to the historical records, in ancient times, the immortal cultivation world flourished, but correspondingly, the gap between the immortal cultivation world and the mortal world was deeper than it was now. In that era, the immortal cultivation world and the mortal world were different. In this regard, Wang Lu could only say, the times have changed. Tetragon frowned but didn't say anything. He just followed Wang Lu to walk on the town's path. Soon, his attention was attracted by this town that had the characteristics of both the immortal cultivation world and the mortal world. From time to time, the girl stopped in front of a building and then fell into a long contemplation. No one knew what she was thinking about. Wang Lu was only responsible for accompanying her and then greeting those familiar but old faces in the town. More than 30 years ago, in this town, an immortal gathering allowed him to set foot on the immortal cultivation world. More than 30 years later, he still remembered the series of puzzles at the town's gate. It was just that the old man who guarded the gate at that time had died of old age 20 years ago. On the day of his death, Wang Lu personally presided over a religious ceremony for him. Now, the people guarding the gate were the grandchildren of the old man, 2 tall and strong young men. After seeing Wang Lu, they greeted him very enthusiastically, but there was a bit of Philistinism in their enthusiasm. For mortals, even a foundation establishment cultivator was a supreme immortal, let alone Wang Lu. Wang Lu didn't care about the thoughts of these mortals. The lifespan of cultivators was long, and their concept of time was also different. In the immortal cultivation world, more than 30 years passed in the blink of an eye, but in the mortal world, It was enough to separate 2 generations. Wang Lu also felt a bit sentimental in his heart. If it was like this in 30 years, what about 16,000 years? For Tetragon, this world was already completely unfamiliar. Among the people of her generation, only 100 or so of her companions had survived, and a considerable number of them had been personally exiled by her. Thinking of this, Wang Lu suddenly remembered a place. I'll take you to taste the special delicacies here. Thus, the 2 of them arrived at the Ru family inn. More than 30 years had passed, and many things in the Spirit Creek town had changed, except for this inn. The 2 wooden doors were half open, revealing a bit of bleakness and dilapidation. Wang Lu pushed the door open and entered. He saw the lady boss dozing off on the counter. The soft sound of her snoring was particularly clear in the quiet inn. However, in a trance, a different scene appeared in front of Wang Lu's eyes. The inn was overcrowded with people. The relatives of the emperor from all over the 9 regions had gathered here, sharpening their swords for the immortal gathering, fighting and scheming against each other. And the hardy girl behind the counter was wild with joy at this rare flow of customers. Taking a deep breath and restraining his thoughts, Wang Lu walked a few steps to the front of the counter. While putting down a large ingot of silver, he said, "Miss, wake up to receive the guest." The next moment, the girl, who was still dozing off, threw a punch at him without thinking. Wang Lu laughed and stretched out his hand to receive the punch. As a result, with a muffled bang, his whole body flew back 30 feet. He somersaulted in mid-air before steadily landing on the ground. Shaking his sore wrist, Wang Lu sighed. Sure enough, it's easy to forget things after a long time. I didn't even remember that your iron fist can break all kinds of techniques. Humph, quickly move your face closer. I'll let you remember it more clearly. Speak, what are you doing here? The lady boss was obviously angry when she woke up, and spoke ill of the rare guest. However, when she saw the girl beside Wang Lu, she suddenly put on a business-like smile. Dear guest, are you here to eat or to stay? Wang Lu sighed. Changing your face like flipping a book in front of others isn't very good, is it? We're here to eat. Just bring out your specialties. The lady boss agreed and ran to the kitchen with enthusiasm. After a while, she came back and said, There's only white rice, salt, and well water left in the kitchen. Why don't I make saltwater rice for you? Back then, an inn with an average daily turnover of millions has been run to this date by you. You're quite capable. Humph, I'm happy to. The 2 of them bickered. Suddenly, Tetragon's gaze turned to the lady boss. 9-tailed celestial fox? The lady boss was startled. You can see it? You have good eyesight. It's been many years since anyone could see the little fellow hidden in my body at a glance. But don't be afraid, the seal is tight, it can't jump out. Tetragon ignored her and turned to ask Wang Lu. Why did the Lingjian school take in a 9-tailed celestial fox in such a close place? That's an evil beast that can't be tamed, the source of disaster. Wang Lu said, anyway, it's already sealed in her body, so it doesn't matter if it's a disaster or not. Also, look at this seal carrier. As he said that, he pointed at the lady boss. Young and beautiful, pleasing to the eye, versatile, and has an iron fist to break spells. It's better to keep it. Being praised by Wang Lu as youthful and beautiful, the lady boss's cheeks flushed, but she tried to put on an unhappy look. She coldly snorted. Boring. After a pause, she said, I'm going to buy some vegetables. Wang Lu smiled. Sure, I haven't tasted your cooking for a long time. However, Tetragon said coldly, no need, I don't have the habit of sitting at the same table with a 9-tailed celestial fox. The lady boss was stunned, and her expression became a little complicated. She wasn't angry, but more of a strange one. As the seal carrier of the 9-tailed celestial fox, she had encountered some strange looks over the years, but such blatant discrimination and exclusion was really rare. Even the cultivators of the Lingjian school, who were the most hurt by the 9-tailed celestial fox, were polite to her. In fact, as the seal carrier, she bore the risk of the 9-tailed celestial fox breaking out of the seal, and bore the side effect of being unable to cultivate. She should be the one who was owed, so what reason did she have to be discriminated against? Seeing that the atmosphere in the shop quickly became awkward, Wang Lu sighed to Tetragon. You want me to take you to visit the Lingjian school? No problem, but please show me the attitude of a spectator, and shut up when you shouldn't talk. For this rude rebuke, Tetragon didn't care. The corner of his mouth slightly raised. I really can't control the affairs of your sect, but the nine-tailed celestial fox has been an ominous sign since the Age of Desolation. You guys are on your own. With that, she got up and left, heading toward the Spirit Sword Mountain. Wang Lu apologized to the lady boss and helplessly followed. It was just that, after all, he was in a hurry, so he didn't notice that there was a trace of inexplicable haze on the face of the girl behind him. Chapter 7:13. On Spirit Sword Mountain, a man and a woman walked side by side on the mountain road. As the woman walked, her eyes penetrated the clouds and went straight to the depths. Although the two were at the foot of the mountain, in a moment, the woman had a general view of Spirit Sword Mountain, including the disciples who cultivated on the mountain. Thus, she asked a question. This is your Lingjian school? As one of the 5 super sects, why are there so few people? Wang Lu thought for a moment. If this question was to be explained, it would take a long time. For example, the culture of Lingjian school was to value quality over quantity. In those days, when pretentiousness became the norm, it was declared that only those who could, in theory, ascend to immortality could enter the mountain. The Blue River region where it was located was not rich, and its high-end resources could not support too many people. The most important thing was that after a catastrophe 150 years ago, the accumulation of many years was wiped out overnight. The Golden Generation and the high-level elders were all killed and injured, and many of the cultivators in the sect were also scattered. Later on, the ruins were rebuilt, and of course, the number of people withered. However, these problems were almost all the sad things of Lingjian school, so Wang Lu was too lazy to mention them, so he simply said, because we are poor. Tetragon nodded and no longer spoke. Wang Lu suddenly exclaimed, do you know how to chat? I'm just making up a reason, don't just believe it, okay? Not long after, the two came to the 4-phase peak. Wang Lu explained that this place was a transportation hub and showed him the transmission array used by Lingjian school. Tetragon observed for a moment and was obviously interested in this kind of array. However, after trying it out, he did not comment. Along the transmission array, Wang Lu first took her to the Misty Peak. At this time, most of the elders of Heavenly Sword Hall, including the sect leader Feng Yin, were in the City of Immortals. There were only 2 elders on the mountain. Considering their temperament, Wang Lu did not take Tetragon to see them. Moreover, with Tetragon's current identity, it was not appropriate for him to meet with the people of the Wanxian League. It was enough for him to bear the crime of meeting with Dixian alone. Therefore, he led the way straight to the Misty Peak cafeteria. If there was anyone on the Spirit Sword Mountain who didn't care about the charge of meeting with Dixian, it was her. Aya, a distinguished guest has arrived. Quickly come out and receive the guest. Quickly prepare a few tables of look up at the starry sky and others. As Wang Lu greeted the people in the cafeteria, he explained to Tetragon, this is the most famous legendary cafeteria in our Spirit Sword Mountain. There is a supreme-level peerless chef here. Before he could finish speaking, Tetragon frowned and said, you're a true monarch cultivator. You're not thinking about breaking through your seclusion and ascending, but cooking here? Wang Lu said, everyone has their own ambitions. Moreover, among the 3,000 great Daos, the immortal Dao may not be the only way to reach the top. The head chef of this cafeteria was a fanatic who was obsessed with cooking, trying to reach the peak of perfection. The stargazing technique can be said to have reached the acme of perfection, enough to make a perfected sovereign faint. He fainted? Oh, he fainted. After Wang Lu corrected himself, he continued to talk nonsense. In short, this person has entered the Dao through cooking, and is close to achieving the Daob. Is it an outside path? Upon hearing this, Tetragon's brows were still tightly knitted, but he didn't say much. It was just that, when he entered the cafeteria and saw the blonde Western Continent chef, Tetragon was really taken aback. Western Continent people? How could you put this kind of person in the key place of Spirit Mountain? Wang Lu was stunned. What? What's wrong with that? Aya, who had just put on her apron, was also baffled. How did she provoke this distinguished guest? Tetragon earnestly said, those who are not of my race must have a different heart. Upon hearing this, Wang Lu smiled. Unexpectedly, Tetragon was actually a standard nationalist. Speaking of which, when the Dixian built the group of immortal tombs, they also traveled to the Western Continent and cooperated with Golden King. This matter should be mutually beneficial for both sides, and the Dixian did not seem to discriminate against foreigners at all. Yet, Tetragon was actually so radical? Or was it because there was a hidden danger in the cooperation with Golden King that made Tetragon so radical? However, no matter what the reason was, it seemed that today's meal could not be eaten. Wang Lu deeply regretted this. He didn't care about anything else, but it was a pity that he couldn't see the King of Dixian eating the look up at the starry sky. After leaving the Misty Peak cafeteria, Wang Lu was in a bit of a dilemma. Where should they go next? This was the view that those who are not of my race must have a different heart, so the area that Wang Lu could take her to visit was very limited. Not to mention Elder Guanhai on the Clear Sky Peak. For a Kunlun slave to be an elder, in the eyes of Tetragon, perhaps it was blasphemy. On the Non-Phase Peak, there were also a number of domestic spirit dogs. Mountain Spirit by Xueqi was one thing, but the reputation of a certain Western Continent demon wolf was even worse than that of the nine-tailed fox. The Stellar Peak was the residence of the sect leader. Now that the sect leader himself was not there, it didn't make sense to take Tetragon there. After thinking about it, he could only take her to visit the new disciples of the Misty Peak and Carefree Peak. In this regard, Tetragon was quite interested. No matter which era, young cultivators meant the future. Through them, it was easier to see the rise and fall of the immortal cultivation world in the next 100 years. However, after seeing the inner and outer court disciples of the Misty Peak and Carefree Peak, Tetragon was extremely disappointed. Are they the average level of your younger generation? Wang Lu thought for a moment and said, not really, because now I'm excluded. If I'm included, the average level can rise by a big step. Upon hearing this, Tetragon still shook his head. Not at all. Wang Lu said, you've been in contact with me for a long time, so your eyes have become picky. In fact, they are still outstanding. For example, this cultivator Xueqi, who has been cultivating for more than 30 years, has now reached the peak shoot on stage, which is quite good. With that, he pointed his finger at a handsome young man on the Misty Peak. However, the person whom Wang Lu pointed at looked slightly embarrassed. Xueqi. This name carried far more weight in the Spirit Sword Mountain more than 30 years ago than it did now. Because in the 2 years after the Immortal Gathering, his progress was the fastest among the same group of cultivators, even faster than Wang Lu. In fact, at that time, everyone's progress was faster than Wang Lu's. Wang Lu's body refining stage made his progress fall behind by a large margin. At the same time, Xueqi's glory in the Misty Peak was infinite. Among his peers, some admired him, some were jealous of him. However, no matter what kind of attitude they had, it only served to highlight his extraordinary status. At the same time, because he was good at socializing, the seniors also took care of him. To put it more exaggeratedly, although at that time, he was an inner court disciple, and Wang Lu was a successor disciple, whose rank was higher than him, in terms of reputation within the sect, perhaps he was even stronger. But what about now? One was a young outstanding talent whose name shook the world, while the other was still cultivating in the mountain, unknown to anyone. Was peak shoot on stage cultivation that great? Compared to some of his senior brothers and senior sisters, it was indeed a lot stronger, but compared to Wang Lu? Compared to the other two successor disciples? Thinking of the days when he and Wang Lu ridiculed each other in the Tangcloud Hall, it seemed like a lifetime had passed. Today's Wang Lu was already an existence that would make the back of his neck ache when he looked up at him. Of course, Wang Lu would not care about the unpleasant things that happened in the past with Xueqi. For him, the dispute at that time was more like an anecdote, especially after resuscitation of the memory of his previous life. How could he care about these real juniors? But now, Wang Lu's generous attitude was sometimes more hurtful. At least, although Xueqi forced a smile on his face, the loneliness in his heart was almost overflowing. At this time, Tetragon suddenly pointed to a figure quietly retreating from the crowd. Who is that? Wang Lu turned his gaze and said with a smile. Wang Zhong, also an outstanding talent in the Lingjian school. Although he is not as good as Xueqi and other talented disciples, he is also above the standard. Above the standard? Tetragon obviously scoffed at this evaluation, but compared to cultivation, she was more concerned about another thing. This person seems to have a record of rebellion. Upon hearing this, Wang Lu was startled. You can even see this? Aren't you a bit too much? Tetragon turned a blind eye to this nonsense, The dignified king of Dixian could see through the past and present lives of a shoot-on-stage little cultivator at a glance, so how could he not see that Wang Zhong and Wang Lu were inextricably linked? In fact, it's not a big deal. A good bird chooses a tree to nest in, and Wang Zhong happened to be blind and followed the wrong person. Tetragon asked, in any case, betrayal should be an indisputable fact. That being the case, why do you tolerate a traitor around? Wang Lu remembered Tetragon's attitude toward traitors and understood her question. However, not everyone hated evil as much as she did. Moreover, from a practical point of view, I tolerate him because it doesn't matter. Can a mere Wang Zhong overturn the sky? Wang Lu smiled. In the end, he's just one of the tens of thousands of ordinary cultivators in 9 regions. Do you want me to care about such a lowly person? Tetragon seriously said, there are some things that are worth your care. However, after saying this, Tetragon turned around and no longer said anything. I've seen Lingjian school, take me to Shangjing sect. This guy really went wherever he wanted. Wang Lu sighed. Okay, let's go to Shangjing sect. Going to Shangjing sect couldn't be as free as going to Lingjian school. He had to prepare in advance and make an appointment to enter, which was not an ordinary trouble. Fortunately, the relationship between Wang Lu and he too was not ordinary. Thus, he directly used his personal channel to greet he too. Thus the journey was smooth. Shangjing sect was far bigger than Lingjian school. The headquarters of Shangjing sect alone was dozens of times bigger than Spirit Sword Mountain. It also had a large population, and the quality of the population was extremely high. It was truly a place where the king pill could be found everywhere, and Yuanying stage cultivators were as many as dogs. Such a magnificent scene made Wang Lu sigh with emotion. Shangjing sect was indeed worthy to be the head of the Wanxian League. The gap between them and the other sects was really too big, especially when they just transferred from Lingjian school. However, when Tetragon visited Shangjing sect, he seemed careless and even absent-minded. The two of them held the pass issued by Hichu Daoren and circled around the headquarters a few times. Tetragon didn't even ask a few questions before he felt tired. I've seen enough here. Take me to Royal Soldier sect. Wang Lu stopped and said, do you want to go on a one-day tour of the 5 uniques of the Wanxian League? You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.